They dragged her to the edge of the village with a rope around her wrists and spit in her hair, and the elder who had once held her as a baby looked straight through her like she was already a corpse. "Walk," he said. "Don't look back. Don't come back." Lyra Vane was 19 years old, and the only family she had left was a brother she couldn't find. If you want to know what happens when the world throws a woman away and she refuses to die quietly, stay with me to the end. Hit that like button and drop the name of your city in the comments so I know where you're watching from tonight. Bum. The wind in Ash Hollow came off the Black Mountains like it had teeth. It cut sideways through the pines, rattled the bone charms nailed above doorways, and carried the smell of wood smoke and something older, something iron. The people of the Hollow called that smell warning. They said it came down from the wildlands when the shifters were restless. They said a woman who breathed it too long would start to hear voices that weren't there. Lyra had been hearing voices her whole life. She didn't need the wind for that. She stood in the square with her wrists tied behind her back and her boots planted in the mud, and she counted the faces of the people who had come to watch her go. 43. She made herself look at every single one. The baker who used to slip her day-old bread when she was small, the midwife who had pulled her out of her mother screaming, the boys she had grown up beside who now wouldn't meet her eyes. 3 rows back, a girl she had once called a sister was crying into the sleeve of her coat, and Lyra couldn't tell if the tears were for her or for the show of it. "Read the charge," Elder Bram said. He was a tall man gone stooped, with hair the color of old ash and a mouth that had forgotten how to be gentle. He had held her, once. He had bounced her on his knee and called her little bird. She remembered that the way you remember a dream you had as a child. Hazy and suspect, and maybe never real at all. The village scribe unrolled a strip of bark paper. His hands were shaking. Lyra noticed that. She filed it away. The small human fact of it, the way a drowning person files away the shape of a piece of driftwood. "Lyra of the House of Vane," the scribe read, "you stand accused of consorting with unnatural forces, of causing the well at the South Field to run black for 3 nights, of causing Hema Oster's goats to birth dead, of speaking to things that do not speak back, of—" "I never touched her goats," Lyra said. Her voice came out flat. It surprised her. She had thought, when the moment came, she would be screaming. She had thought she would be on her knees. Instead, there was this dry, steady thing in her throat, like a coal that had burned too long to flare up again. "Silence her," Bram said, without looking at her. A man she didn't know by name stepped forward and struck her across the mouth with the back of his hand. Her head snapped sideways. She tasted copper. She did not fall. "I never touched her goats," she said again, louder this time, and she turned her bloodied mouth toward Hema Oster in the crowd. Hema, who had stood at her door last spring and asked Lyra for a tonic for her cough, and taken it, and paid in a chipped clay pot of honey. "Hema, you know I didn't." Hema looked at the dirt. "Strike her again," Bram said. "Don't." Another voice, younger, cracked at the edges. "Don't, please, she didn't." It was the boy. Tam. 17, all elbows and Adam's apple, the baker's second son. He had been sweet on her for 2 summers, and she had been careful with him the way you were careful with a bird that had landed on your windowsill. He was pushing through the crowd now, red-eyed, and 2 of the older men grabbed him by the arms before he could get to the front. "Tam," she said. "Tam, don't. It's all right." "It's not all right," he shouted. His voice broke on the last word, and that, somehow, was the thing that almost undid her. "She's not a witch. She's just... She's just what?" Bram said. He turned finally to look at Tam. His eyes were tired. Lyra understood suddenly that he was tired of her. Tired of the problem of her. Tired of the way she had refused for 19 years to be explained. "Boy, go home to your mother." "She's just her," Tam said, and it came out pleading, and it came out useless. And Lyra watched him be dragged backward into the crowd, and she did not let herself cry. She had decided not to cry a long time ago. Maybe when she was 8, and the other children had held her down in the creek and tried to drown the strangeness out of her, and her hair had turned white in a single streak over her right temple where one of them had grabbed her. Maybe when she was 11, and she had woken to find a dead crow on her pillow with its eyes sewn shut. Maybe when she was 14 and her mother had died of the fever, and the women who had come to wash the body had made the sign of the horn at Lyra before they would touch her own mother's hands. Somewhere along the way, the crying had dried up. The coal remained. "The charge stands," Bram said. "The house of Vane is ended in Ash Hollow. By the law of the stone she is cast out. No hearth will take her, no kin will claim her, no road back." He raised the staff. He brought it down. The sound of its iron-shod end on the flat stone in the center of the square was the sound Lyra knew she would hear in her sleep for the rest of her life, however long that turned out to be. "Thunk! Cut her free," he said, "and give her what she came with." They threw her pack at her feet. Someone had gone through it. She could tell by the way the straps were loose. Whatever had been worth anything was gone. A knife. Her mother's comb. The copper bracelet her brother had given her when she was 6, with the little wolf's head on the clasp. She didn't ask for the bracelet back. She knew better. The rope came off her wrists. She rubbed them once, slow. She bent and picked up the pack. She slung it over her shoulder. She looked at Elder Bram one more time, and she did not say, "You held me when I was a baby," and she did not say, "You called me little bird," and she did not say any of the 1,000 things rattling in her chest like stones in a can. She said, "My brother?" Bram's jaw worked. "If Kyle comes back," she said, "tell him I went north." "Your brother's dead, girl." "He isn't. He rode out with the levy 2 winters ago, and not one of them came home. Let him rest." "He isn't dead." She said it quietly. She said it the way you set something down that you are not going to pick up again. "I'd feel it. I'd know." Bram looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Grief, maybe, or the ghost of it. Then it was gone. "North, then," he said. "Tell the wolves we sent them our regards." The crowd laughed. It was a thin laugh, a nervous one, and Lyra took that small, ugly sound with her as she turned and walked out of the only world she had ever known. She walked until the village was a smudge behind her. Then she walked until the smudge was gone. The road out of Ash Hollow climbed for half a day through terraced fields gone fallow, then plunged into the pine belt, where the light went green and strange and the needles underfoot muffled every step. She had been on this road exactly twice in her life. Once as a child, when her father was alive, to trade at the river market. Once last spring, when she had come out this way looking for a kind of root that grew under the black oaks, and had come home with her basket full and her dress torn because some boys from the next hollow had seen her alone and decided a cast-out witch owed them something. She had gotten away that time. She had not been sure how. Her hands had gone hot, and the nearest boy had fallen back clutching his face and the others had run. She had walked home shaking so hard she'd dropped half the roots. That night she had lain in her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to tell herself it had been the sun in their eyes. It had been a trick of the light. It had been anything at all, except her. She did not let herself think about that now. Thinking about it was a door she could not afford to open on a road with no walls. By sundown her boots were wet through. The pines had given way to scrub and gray rock. Somewhere off to the east a wolf called, and a second one answered it. She stopped under the lee of a boulder that had a little hollow at its base, crouched, and ate half of the black bread she had stuffed into her pack that morning before dawn, before the knock on the door, before everything. The bread tasted like nothing. She made herself chew it anyway. She didn't build a fire. Fire would bring company, and the only company this side of the pine belt was the kind she couldn't afford. She slept with her back against the stone and her knife. Her new knife, the small belt knife she'd managed to hide in her boot, because she wasn't stupid. She had known for weeks this was coming, across her lap. She dreamed of her brother. She dreamed Kyle was standing on the other side of a wide black river, calling to her, and she could not hear him over the sound of the water. She woke up before dawn with the copper taste of her own blood still in her mouth, and she kept going. Bamish. On the second day, the road forked. One branch went northeast toward the river towns and eventually toward what the maps in Elder Bram's house had called the civilized country. Cities, walls, a king somewhere far away who wrote his name in gold ink and had never in his life set foot in a place like Ash Hollow. The other branch went north and a little west, up into the broken foothills, toward the frontier garrison at Carr's Ford, where the king's soldiers still pretended they held a line against what lay beyond. Beyond was the wildlands. Beyond was where Kael had ridden. Lyra took the North Fork without stopping. By the third day, she was limping. By the fourth, her lip had split open again from the cold. By the fifth, she ran out of bread. On the sixth day, she came down out of the foothills into the valley where Carr's ford sat like a scab on a wound. The town was nothing, a palisade of sharpened logs gone black with pitch, a cluster of low stone buildings inside, smoke rising from too many chimneys, and the river running wide and gray past the southern wall. The gate stood open. A bored soldier with a crossbow over one shoulder was picking his teeth with a splinter. She pulled her hood up over the white streak in her hair. She made her face empty. She walked in. Carr's ford smelled like wet leather and old fish and piss. The main street was mud. Men in mismatched leathers moved along it in twos and threes, and a knot of women in bright cheap dresses stood under an awning calling out prices to passers-by in a kind of sing-song that hurt her ears. Somewhere a dog was fighting something that screamed. Lyra had never seen so many strangers in her life. She had also never, in her life, felt more invisible. She counted that a blessing. She kept walking. "Hey, hey, you!" The voice came from a doorway. She didn't turn. "Girl with the hood, yeah, you. Come here a minute." She kept walking. A hand closed around her upper arm. She reacted before she thought. She had been reacting before she thought her whole life. And she drove her elbow back and down into something soft. And the hand let go, and she was 3 running steps away before she heard the man wheezing out a curse. She didn't look back. She ducked sideways into an alley, and then another alley, and then she was in a little crooked square with a stone well in the middle of it and a thin old woman drawing water, and she stopped, breathing hard, and pressed her shoulders to the wall. The old woman looked at her a long time. "You're new," the woman said. "Just passing through." The woman hauled up her bucket. "Passing through to where?" "North." "North," the woman said, and she laughed. It was a dry laugh, like paper catching. "North of here's the wildlands, child. Passing through the wildlands is something people say, not something they do." "I'm looking for someone." The woman set her bucket on the stone. She was not as old as Lyra had first thought. Maybe 50. Maybe less. Her face had been used hard. "Everyone in Carr's ford is looking for someone," she said. "Mostly we're looking for the person we used to be. You want some advice, girl?" "No?" "I'll give it anyway. You've got a face that's going to get you in trouble in this town. Keep your hood up. Don't eat at the sign of the Red Hand. Don't drink anywhere at all. And if a man in a black cloak starts asking questions about you, you run. You understand? You don't stop to ask why. You run." "Why would a man in a black cloak?" "I said don't ask why." The woman picked up her bucket again. "Good luck, girl. You won't have any." She walked off across the square. Lyra watched her go and felt, for the first time since the road, something close to afraid. She found the inn called the Long Winter by the smell of its stew before she saw its sign. She had 3 copper bits in the bottom of her pack, wrapped in a scrap of linen, the last of what her mother had hidden in the floorboards under the loom, and she traded one of them for a bowl of something gray and a heel of bread and a corner of a table in the back. She kept her hood up. She ate with her head down and her left hand wrapped around the handle of her knife under the table. The inn was half full. Men mostly. A few women who were working and a few who weren't. The talk was loud and low in layers. Trade talk about pelts, about grain, about who owed who what at cards. Every so often someone would lean close to their neighbor and drop their voice, and Lyra would catch a word. "Beasts," she heard twice. "Pack," once. "Thorne." That last one made the man saying it look around before he said it, like it was a word you could get slapped for. She finished her stew. She scraped the bowl clean with her bread. She was thinking about asking the innkeeper if there was anywhere she could sleep for another copper. She would sleep in a stable. She would sleep on a kitchen floor. When the door of the Long Winter banged open and 4 soldiers walked in. The talk in the room died in stages, like a fire going out. They were king's men. They wore the gray and red. 3 were young and 1 was older, a sergeant by his stripes, with a face that looked like it had been carved with a dull axe. They stood in the doorway and let their eyes go around the room. "Looking for a girl," the sergeant said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. 19, maybe 20, dark hair, white streak over the right temple, came in from the south road today, ash hollow cast off. Lyra's hand closed so hard around her knife that the wood creaked. How? How could they? Ash Hollow was 6 days' walk. Ash Hollow was a speck on no map that mattered. No one in Ash Hollow would have sent word to the king's men. They didn't even send word to the king's men when they needed help. And yet here these four were, in this inn, on this night, with a description that fit her down to the streak in her hair. The sergeant's eyes moved across the room. They passed over her hooded corner without pausing. They kept moving. Don't breathe. Don't breathe. Don't. Anybody seen her? The sergeant said. Silence. Reward, the sergeant said. Silver, 2 whole coins not cut, for the man who points at her. The silence this time had a different texture. Lyra could feel it. People were thinking about it. Someone, somewhere in this room, was going to decide that 2 silver coins was worth a stranger's life. It was just a question of how long it would take them to work up to it. She moved before she decided to move. She stood, slowly, not fast, because fast was what a spooked animal did, and a spooked animal was what they were looking for. And she walked toward the back of the inn where she had seen a hallway leading off to the kitchens. She did not look at the soldiers. She did not look at anyone. She made herself a woman going to use the privy. She made her shoulders loose. Her knees wanted to shake. She did not let them. She was 3 steps from the hallway when a young soldier, the youngest of the 4, a boy really, with bad skin and a nose that had been broken and healed crooked, stepped into her path. Hood down, he said. I'm sorry? Hood, down. Behind him the sergeant was turning. The whole room was turning. Lyra felt the weight of every pair of eyes in the long winter settle on the back of her neck like a hand. Sergeant, the young soldier said, and he reached out and pushed her hood back himself. The room made a small sound, like an intake of breath but uglier. Lyra saw a man at the nearest table cross himself against her, the old gesture, the horn sign her own village had made the day they took her mother's body away. The sergeant came forward. He looked her up and down. He smiled. It was not a nice smile. Lyra of Ash Hollow, he said. You've got the wrong girl. No, he said. I don't. Put your hands where I can see them. You're coming with us. On what charge? On the charge of what you are. He jerked his head at 2 of his men. Bind her. If she so much as whispers, gag her. I said bind her. The younger soldier reached for her wrist. Lyra saw his hand come up like it was moving through honey. Time was doing that thing it did when her chest got tight, when the world narrowed down to a tunnel. She could see the dirt under his fingernails. She could see a small pale scar on the back of his thumb. She could see very clearly that she was about to be taken, and she did not know what happened to girls like her when men like this took them. But she was not going to find out. Not today. Not ever. Her hand went to her boot. And then the door of the long winter opened again, very quietly, and the temperature in the room dropped. It was not a metaphor. The fire in the great hearth, which had been roaring a moment before, flickered and pulled back like a dog crouching. The candles on the tables guttered. The sergeant, who had been smiling, stopped smiling. The young soldier's hand, halfway to Lyra's wrist, froze. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall. That was the first thing. Tall and lean in a way that made Lyra think of a wolf in winter, the kind that had learned to go a long time on very little. His hair was black and long enough to be tied back with a leather cord. His coat was black too, a long one, patched at the elbows, travel dark at the hem. He had a sword at his hip. He wore no sigil, no colors, nothing that said who he belonged to or who belonged to him. His eyes were the wrong color. That was the second thing. They were yellow, not brown yellow, not amber. Yellow, like a lantern on a dark road, like a cat's, like nothing human at all. Every person in the inn had gone very still. The man's eyes moved slowly across the room. They stopped on Lyra. They did not blink. She's mine, he said. His voice was not loud. It was low and even, and it had the finality of a door closing. The sergeant recovered first. He was, Lyra would realize later, not actually stupid. only badly led, and badly frightened, and too proud to show it. "I don't know who you are, stranger," the sergeant said, "but this woman is a fugitive of the crown. Stand aside or be counted with her." The stranger did not move. He did not reach for his sword. He tilted his head maybe an inch, studying the sergeant the way a man studies a piece of meat he's not sure he wants. "She's mine," he said again. "That's what I said. Did you not hear me?" "I heard you." "Then stand aside." "She's a witch," the sergeant said. The word came out cheap, the way such words do when a man is using them to feel bigger than he is. "She's bewitched you. Step back, stranger, and I'll have the priest cleanse." "Your wife." "What?" "Your wife," the stranger said. "She's called Merla. You have 2 daughters. One of them is sick this winter. She coughs blood. You sent 30 silver to your brother in the south last spring, and you told your captain it was for the girl's medicine, but it wasn't. It was to pay your brother's gambling debt so they wouldn't break his hands. You haven't told Merla. You're not going to." The sergeant had gone the color of paper. "How?" "I could go on," the stranger said. "I don't think you want me to." A long second passed. Someone at the far end of the inn dropped a cup. No one looked at it. "I don't know you," the sergeant said. His voice had gone thin. "You don't," the stranger agreed. "That's the only reason you're still standing. The girl is mine. Walk out. Take your boys. Go somewhere else tonight. And whoever sent you, you go back and you tell them she's under Thorne's hand now. You say that name, Thorne. They'll know what it means." The sergeant's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Lyra. He looked at the stranger. He looked briefly at the door. And Lyra understood, watching him, that he was calculating. Trying to work out whether he could take this man, trying to work out what he would lose if he tried. Whatever he saw in the stranger's yellow eyes decided him. "Boys," the sergeant said. "Out." "Sarge, out." They went. The 4 of them filed past the stranger one at a time, and each one of them, Lyra noticed, went sideways through the doorway so as not to have to turn his back on him. The young soldier was the last. His face was the color of ash, and he was shaking, visibly, and at the door he turned and looked at Lyra once, and his eyes were full of something that was almost pity. Then the door closed. The inn breathed out. The stranger did not move. He stood there in the doorway with his long black coat and his yellow eyes. And he looked at Lyra, and she looked back at him. And in that moment, standing in the ruin of what was supposed to have been her anonymous night, she was not grateful. She was not relieved. She was furious. "I didn't ask you," she said. His eyebrows went up, very slightly. "I didn't ask for your help," she said again, louder. Her voice was shaking. She hated that it was shaking. "I don't know you. I don't belong to anyone. You don't get to walk in here and tell a room full of strangers that I'm yours." The man looked at her for a long, considering moment. "Would you rather have gone with him?" he said. It was not a question. Because that was what was happening. He was going to bind your hands and take you out of here and put you in a wagon and drive you a long way, and you were not going to come back from where he took you. So before you spit in my face for the word I used, you might think for a minute about whose face you would rather have been spitting in tonight. Lyra closed her mouth. The stranger crossed the room toward her. People got out of his way. He moved like a man who was used to people getting out of his way, which meant he had probably never, in his life, had to ask for it. He stopped a pace from her and he looked down at her. He was a head taller, at least, and up close his eyes were even stranger. The yellow had flecks of gold in it. The pupils were not round, they were slightly, almost imperceptibly, too narrow for a human face. "Sit down," he said. "Finish your bread. We leave at first light." "We?" "Unless you'd rather sleep in the street. They'll come back with more men. They always do." "I don't know who you are." "My name is Raze Thorne. That's a start." "That's not a name." "It's the name I have." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down in it like a man settling in for a long wait. "You're Lyra, Lyra Vane. Cast out of Ash Hollow 6 days ago on a charge of being what you are. Your father was Evo Vane, a smith, died of a chest sickness when you were 12. Your mother was Sarah, died of the fever. You were 14. Your brother is Kyle. You think he's alive. He is." The room tilted. Lyra sat down. Not because he had told her to, because her knees had decided it on their own. "He's alive. Yes." "How do you know that?" Raze Thorne picked up her cup of water, her water from her side of the table without asking, and drank half of it. He set it back down. Because I'm the one who pulled him out of the river 2 winters ago with 3 crossbow bolts in him, he said. And I'm the one who's had him under my roof every night since. Eat your bread, Lyra Vane. We have a long way to go. She did not eat her bread. She sat there in the long winter and she stared at the yellow-eyed stranger across from her, and the room made all the small sounds a room makes when it is trying very hard to pretend it is not listening. A log shifted in the hearth. Someone coughed into their sleeve. A woman laughed. The wrong kind of laugh. Too loud. Too quick. You're lying, Lyra said. I'm not. Kyle is alive. I've told you. If he's alive, why hasn't he come home? And that, the very reasonable, the very quiet question at the middle of her chest, the one she had carried for 2 winters like a stone in her shoe, that was the first thing that cracked her voice. Raze Thorne looked at her, not unkindly. Something moved in his face, something that she thought might be the shadow of an actual answer, and then it was gone. Because home is a word that means something different where I come from, he said. And because he can't. Not yet. And because I told him not to. You eat, he said, or don't. But decide. The man who came in here looking for you is not the worst man looking for you. The worst man looking for you is 3 days away on a good horse, and he rides fast. So you have until first light to decide whether you come with me to somewhere you might survive the week, or you stay here and wait for him to arrive. I'd suggest the first one, but I've been wrong before. Lyra picked up her bread. She did not eat it. Her hands were shaking too hard. She held it because holding something was better than not holding anything, and she made herself look at him, and she made herself ask the things she needed to ask. The man 3 days away. What about him? What does he want with me? Raze Thorne's yellow eyes went very, very still. It was the first time she had seen him hesitate. It lasted less than a breath. Then it was gone, and his face was smooth again, and he answered her in the same low, even voice he'd used with the sergeant. He wants the thing in your blood, he said. The thing your village tried to drown out of you when you were 8. The thing that came up out of your hands last spring when those boys caught you under the oaks, and you did not, in fact, go home with your basket full of roots because the sun was in their eyes. Lyra stopped breathing. He's been looking for a girl like you, Raze Thorne said, for a very long time, and he has stopped being patient about it. That's why the king's men are this far north, and that's why they know your face, and that's why the woman at the well told you to run if you saw a man in a black cloak. Because he's coming. He was always coming, and you walked right out of your village and up the one road that was going to put you in front of him. Then why? Her voice cracked. She made it work. Then why are you here? If he's coming, why are you the one who found me first? Raze Thorne smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was not an unkind one either. It was the smile of a man who had been living in a very small, very cold room for a very long time and had just been asked whether he liked the view. Because I was looking too, he said, and I ride faster. He stood. The chair scraped. The whole room flinched. Finish your bread, he said. You'll need it. Sleep if you can. I've paid for a room. You'll have it to yourself, and no one in this building is stupid enough to open that door until I open it. We leave before the gate opens. You bring what you can carry. You leave the rest. And Lyra... She looked up at him. The yellow of his eyes was the last thing in the room that still had color. When we get where we're going, he said, the people there are not going to like you. They're going to look at you the way Ash Hollow looked at you. Worse, maybe. You can't let it break you. Do you understand me? Do you understand me? Yes, she said. Quiet. Steady. The coal. I understand you. Good. He turned to go. At the door he stopped and he spoke over his shoulder, and his voice had gone rougher, a little, like he was saying something he hadn't meant to say. Your brother asks about you, every day. I told him I'd bring you back. I don't generally break my word. Then he walked out into the street, and the door of the long winter fell closed behind him, and the fire in the hearth, very slowly, began to remember how to burn. Lyra sat at that corner table for a long time after he was gone. The bread went cold in her hand. The stew congealed in its bowl. Someone, The innkeeper, she thought, a big woman with her hair in a cloth, came and took the bowl away and did not meet her eyes and did not ask for the copper. Someone else put a tallow candle on the table. The talk in the room came slowly back, but softer, the way talk comes back in a house after a death. No one looked at her. No one. That was, except a single man in the corner by the door. A small man, neat, in a gray traveling cloak, who had not been there when she came in, and who she had not seen enter. He was drinking a cup of wine. He was watching her over the rim of it. When she met his eyes, he smiled, a small and pleasant and courteous smile, and he raised his cup to her in a tiny salute. Then he set the cup down, and he stood, and he walked out of the long winter into the night. Lyra did not know who he was, but she was a girl who had learned young to trust the thing in her gut that knew before her head did. And the thing in her gut was telling her very clearly that the man in the gray cloak had not been drinking wine. He had been waiting, and now, whatever he had been waiting to see, he had seen it. She thought about the woman at the well. If a man in a black cloak starts asking questions about you, you run. The man who had just left was not wearing black, but Lyra understood, sitting there in the smoky warmth of the long winter with the taste of her own blood still on her split lip and the name Thorne ringing in her ears, and her brother, alive. Suddenly a real thing in the world again, that colors could be changed, that cloaks could be changed, that a man who wanted something badly enough would wear any color at all to get close enough to take it. She stood up. Her knees held. That was something. She took her bread. She took her pack. She crossed the common room with her hood up and her hand on her knife, and she went up the narrow stairs to the little room Raze Thorne had paid for, and she shut the door, and she slid the bolt, and she sat down on the edge of the straw mattress in the dark. She did not cry. She had decided a long time ago not to cry, but she bent forward in the dark with her elbows on her knees and her hands over her face, and she let her shoulders shake once, just once, hard, the way a tree shakes when a heavy branch falls off it, and she whispered her brother's name into the hollow of her palms. Then she straightened up. She checked the bolt. She checked the window. She laid the knife beside her on the pillow. Somewhere below her, in the common room, a fiddle started to play. Somewhere outside in the mud street, a dog barked and was answered. And somewhere, 3 days east on a good horse, a man she had never seen was riding toward her through the dark. Lyra Vane cast out of Ash Hollow, daughter of a dead smith and a fever-killed mother, sister of a boy she had been told was a corpse and was not, closed her eyes in a stranger's paid-for bed above a frontier inn. She did not sleep, but she waited for morning, and when the first gray light came creeping up over the palisade of Carr's ford, and a soft, steady knock came at her door, and a low voice on the other side of it said only her name, Lyra. Once, like a question and a promise at the same time, she was already standing, already dressed, already at the door with her hand on the bolt and her pack on her shoulder and the coal in her chest, still burning, not yet broken. She slid the bolt back. She opened the door. Raze Thorne was already turning away down the hall before she'd gotten the door halfway open. "Bring everything," he said. "We're not coming back to this room." "I don't have everything. I don't have anything." "Then bringing it won't take long." He didn't wait for her to answer. He went down the stairs 2 at a time, silent as a cat, and Lyra had to half run to keep up. The long winter was still asleep. The fiddle had gone quiet hours ago, and the common room smelled of cold ashes and spilled beer and bodies, with 3 or 4 men slumped over tables where they had drunk themselves into wherever they were. The innkeeper was nowhere. A single tallow candle guttered on the bar. Raze slid a coin across the wood. Silver. He didn't ring the bell. He didn't wait. Outside, the cold took Lyra's breath. The mud had frozen in the night into a landscape of hard little ridges that tried to turn her ankle with every step. Gray light was coming up off the river, but the sun wasn't up yet. The gate of Carr's ford was closed, and the guard on top of the palisade was huddled into his cloak with his back to the wind. "The gate's not open," she said. "It will be. You said we were leaving before it opened." "I said we were leaving before it opened for the day. Different thing." He walked her south, not north. Down along the inside of the palisade, past the stables, past a low stone building that smelled of tannin and death, past a yard where a woman was already up feeding hogs. The woman looked up as they passed. Her eyes went to Raze and then skipped sideways, and she bent very quickly back to her slop bucket. Lyra understood. watching that small cowardice, that people in this town knew Raze Thorne's face, and that knowing it was not the kind of thing they wanted to be seen doing. Where are we going? Sally Port, South Wall, there's a man. A man. There's always a man. They came to a narrow, iron-banded door set into the palisade, half hidden behind a woodpile. Raze knocked once, paused, twice, paused, once again. The door cracked. A red-rimmed eye looked out at them. You, the eye said. Me. 2 silver. 1, 1.5, and I didn't see her. Fine. Raze passed coins through the crack. The door groaned open a foot. Raze put his hand flat between Lyra's shoulder blades. Not hard, but firm, the way a man moves a horse that is thinking too much. And he pushed her through. On the other side of the wall was a narrow path. The river on her right, the black pines of the foothills rising on her left. 2 horses waited under a lean-to, a stocky gray and a rangy black with a white sock on one foot, both saddled, both breathing steam. Can you ride? Some. Some is not an answer. Can you ride fast for a long time without falling off? She stopped. She made herself tell him the truth. No, not really. I rode the cart mule when I was a girl, that's all. He swore quietly. Then he shrugged and took the bridle of the black and swung himself up into the saddle in one motion. He reached a hand down for her. Up, behind me. Hold on to my belt, not my waist. If you fall off, I will not come back for you the first time. I might come back for you the second. Get on the horse, Lyra. She got on the horse. It was higher up than she remembered. Her legs didn't know what to do, and the gray, tied to a lead, was blowing at her knee like it was taking her measure and finding her short. Raze's back in front of her was a long, dark wall. She closed her fingers around the worn leather of his belt and tried not to think about how thin a piece of leather was. And then he clicked his tongue, and the black moved. They took the river path at a walk until they were out of sight of the palisade. Then he nudged the black to a canter, and then, once the path widened, once the cold had bitten some sense into her hands, to something faster. She hated it. Every stride hammered up through her spine. Her teeth clicked together twice hard enough that she tasted blood again. The wind peeled her hood back and the cold ate at the wet on her lip, and she thought more than once, I am going to fall. I am going to fall, and he is going to leave me here, and the man in the gray cloak is going to find me lying in the mud with a broken neck, and everyone will think the wolves did it. She did not fall. She did not know how long they rode. The sun came up behind a thin gray veil of cloud and did nothing to warm anything. The river fell away to their right, loud and fast, the color of iron. The road narrowed, and became a track, and then the track turned up off the river and climbed into the pines, and the pines swallowed them. After maybe 2 hours, Raze pulled up in a clearing where a spring came out of a rock, and a flat place had been worn in the moss by horses that had stopped there before. He swung down. He reached up and put his hands at her waist and lifted her down like she weighed nothing. Her legs folded under her. He caught her by the elbow before she hit the ground. I warned you. You didn't. I thought about warning you, close enough. He let her go. She stood, swaying, pretending her thighs didn't feel like they belonged to someone else. He led the horses to the spring. He broke the skin of ice on it with the heel of his boot. Neither of them spoke for a while. Lyra sat down, very carefully, on a flat stone and watched him work, and thought about how easily he did it. The loosening of the girths, the check of a hoof, the murmur to the black that was not quite a word. You lied to the soldiers, she said finally. About which part? About me being yours. You made it sound like I belonged to you. I did. I don't. I know. He didn't look up from the gray's near hoof. Where we're going, that's the word they'll understand. Mine. Not the human woman I'm helping, not the girl I'm taking home to see her brother. That kind of sentence gets laughed at, and then it gets you both killed. Mine. That's the sentence that keeps the teeth where they belong. The teeth. He glanced up. His yellow eyes were almost amber in the dull light of the clearing. You've heard stories about the wildlands. Everyone's heard stories about the wildlands. Forget the ones about the things coming down to eat children. Those are for frightening small boys into not running off. Remember the ones about the pack laws, about the houses, the bonds, about the word claim. Those are the ones you're walking into. I'm not walking into anything. I came to find my brother. Your brother is in a house in a valley, half a day's hard ride from here. And he lives in that house because a man named Raze Thorne, who is my uncle and who runs that valley, agreed to let him live. That permission is not transferable. That permission does not cover you. Do you understand what I'm telling you? No. Good. Honesty. I'll take it. He straightened. I'm telling you that the only reason you are not going to be driven out of that valley at first sight is because I said a word at a crossroads inn to a sergeant who was about to put you in chains. If the word had been friend or charge or even cousin, it wouldn't have held. Mine holds. You don't have to like it. You have to not argue with it out loud. Do that, and you might get to see your brother before the sun goes down. Lyra looked at her hands. They were red from the cold, and there was dried blood on her knuckles, from somewhere she didn't remember hitting. I don't belong to you, she said, softer this time. You don't. That's between us. Out there, he gestured vaguely north through the pines. That word is a wall. Stand behind it. He came over to her and crouched, so his face was level with hers. She didn't like how close he was. She didn't move. One more thing, he said. And this one is not advice. This one is a rule. What? Whatever happens in that valley, whatever they say to you, whatever looks they give you, you do not lose your temper. You do not raise your voice. You do not... His eyes flicked briefly to her hands. You do not let whatever is in you out. Not the first day. Not the first week. You hear me. Not even if someone spits at your feet. Not even if they put a dead thing on your pillow. I haven't done anything like that since last spring under the oaks. She shut her mouth. How? Because your brother talks in his sleep, Lyra Vane. Raze stood up. He brushed off his knees. And because I have better ears than most men. Dad, they rode again. The pines got bigger. The track got narrower. At one point it wasn't a track at all, just a seam in the undergrowth that the black seemed to know by smell. The cold was a living thing now. It had gotten into her boots, under her coat, behind her eyes. She stopped thinking about being cold the way people stop thinking about being underwater. Not because it gets better, but because there is nothing else. Around midday, the pines broke. They stood at the top of a long slope, and below them a valley opened out. Wide, bowl-shaped, with a river threading the middle of it, and terraces climbing the near slope and smoke rising from a cluster of long, low buildings near the water. It was not a village like Ash Hollow. The buildings were bigger. The roofs were made of something darker and heavier than thatch. A stockade ran around part of it, but not all, as if whoever had built the place wasn't actually afraid of what came down out of the hills at night. At the far end of this valley, higher up, a long hall stood by itself on a shelf of stone. It had a double roof. It had pillars at the front carved to look like something that was neither a man nor an animal. Smoke came out of 3 different chimneys. That's the hall, Raze said. That's where we're going. That's where my brother is. That's where my uncle is. Your brother is in the house with the red door by the river. We'll go there first. You have... He tilted his head at the sun. Maybe an hour before the hall finds out you're in the valley. Use it. They went down the slope at a walk. People looked up as they came. A boy of maybe 10 who was carrying a yoke of buckets stopped and stared. An old woman on a bench outside one of the long houses took her pipe out of her mouth and watched them pass without expression. A young man with a scar running the length of his jaw straightened up from where he'd been splitting wood and set the axe down very deliberately and watched. No one spoke. No one greeted Raze. Lyra realized, with a small, cold shock, that the silence was not indifference. These people were watching her the way the people of Ash Hollow had watched her. She lifted her chin. She looked straight between the black horse's ears. Don't raise your voice, Raze had said. Don't lose your temper. Fine. She wouldn't. They rode down to a house with a red door. It was not a big house. It had 1 story, and a small garden behind it, and a chimney that was smoking. A girl was coming out of it with a basket of wet linen to hang in the thin midday sun. She was maybe 15, dark-haired, pale-skinned, with a smudge of blue on her temple where she had hit it on something. She looked up as the horses stopped. The basket slipped out of her hands. Raze, she said. Raze, you didn't say... I know. He's going to... I know, Nettle. Where is he? Inside. He's inside. He's... She broke off. She was staring at Lyra now. She took a half step forward and then a half step back, and her hand came up to her mouth. Oh? Yes, Raze said. Oh, the girl said again. Her eyes had gone wet. Oh, it really is. Nettle, inside. Raze was down off the horse before Lyra had worked out how to move. He lifted her down again, not gently, not roughly, just efficiently, as if she were a sack of something that needed to be put in the right place. He didn't let go of her arm. Slow, he said, low. He doesn't know yet. Don't run at him. Slow. The red door was open. The inside of the house was warm. It smelled of wood smoke, and of something herbal simmering in a pot, and of a body that had been in bed too long. There was a pallet by the fire. A man was sitting up on it, half turned away from the door, with a wool blanket pulled around his shoulders. His hair had gotten long. He had a beard now, uneven, the kind a man grows when he has no mirror and also no interest. One of his arms was bent the wrong way at the elbow, not badly. It had been set, and set by someone who knew how, but not quite straight either. Lyra's feet stopped working. She stood in the doorway of a stranger's house with a stranger's hand on her arm, and she looked at the back of her brother's head, and she had been ready for a lot of things on this road, but she had not been ready for this small domestic thing, for the sight of Kyle Vane sitting on a pallet in a warm room with a blanket around his shoulders, alive, while she had spent 2 winters standing at the edge of the south field at dusk, whispering his name into the dark. Kyle, Raze said gently. Her brother started to turn. I brought someone. Kyle turned all the way around. His face was thinner than she remembered. There was a long, pale scar across the bridge of his nose. His eyes were the same. His eyes, the deep-set gray-green eyes her mother had given to both her children, were exactly the same, and when they found her in the doorway, they went round, and then they went wet, and his mouth came open and nothing came out of it at all. Lie, he said finally. Just the nickname, just the old small private thing he'd called her when they were children. She crossed the room in 3 steps. She didn't remember doing it. She went down on her knees by the pallet, and she put her arms around him, and his blanket smelled like wood smoke and sickbed and him, the faint, wrong, sweet undersmell of a body that had been healing a long time, and he was shaking, or she was shaking, or both of them were, and she pressed her face into his shoulder, and she made a sound she had not made since she was 8 years old. You're alive, she said. You rotten. I know. I buried you. In my head I buried you. I said the words. I know, Lie. I know. Don't you ever... I know. She pulled back. She held him by the shoulders. She looked at him. She looked at the bent arm, at the new scar, at the hollows under his eyes that had not been there when he rode out 2 winters ago with a company of 40 boys, none of whom had come back. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and his face crumpled. They told me you were cast out, he said. Nettle came back from the ford 3 weeks ago, and she said the traders were saying, but... She said a girl from Ash Hollow with a white streak. I'm fine. You're not fine, I am now. He caught her wrist. He turned her hand over, looking at her split knuckles, her cracked lip, the raw place on her wrist where the rope had been. He didn't say anything. His jaw worked. Who? He said. Kyle. Who? It doesn't matter. It's done. Elder Bram? Bram. It's done. He looked up, past her, at Raze, who was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and his yellow eyes half-lidded, watching them the way a man watches a fire he is pretending not to be warming his hands at. How long? Kyle said to him. 6 days out of Ash Hollow. Soldiers caught up to her in Carr's ford last night. They had a description. They had a name. Someone's been paid to look. Paid? I didn't want to say it in front of her before she'd eaten. Raze tipped his chin at Lyra. But yes, paid. Good money, too. I'd guess the order came out of Duskmere, but I can't prove it yet. The name did something to Kyle's face. He went a color that Lyra had not seen on him before, not even the day their father had died. Duskmere, he said. Yes. He knows about her. He knew before we did. How long? Longer than is comfortable. Kyle let out a breath. He put his hand over his eyes. His bent arm trembled, a small bad tremor that had nothing to do with the cold. Lyra watched him, and for the first time since she had walked through the red door, she felt something other than joy. And the something was fear. Kael, she said. Who is Duskmere? Her brother did not take his hand off his eyes. Kael. He's the man who put the bolts in me, Kael said, quietly. 2 winters ago, at the river crossing. Our company, the whole levy. We weren't there by accident, Lie. We were sold. Someone in the village sold us. What? Someone in Ash Hollow told a man in a gray cloak where 40 boys from the Hollows would be on a certain night. That man told a man in black. That man in black is named Oral Duskmere, and he is He is something we don't have a clean word for where you come from. He's a collector. He collects people like you. Like you, Lyra. She sat back on her heels. I'm not, she said, and the word anything died in her mouth because she was, and she had always been, and the only people in this room who did not know it were the ones who had loved her into pretending. Kael lowered his hand. He looked at her. He looked for a long moment, tired to the bone. You never asked, he said, why Mama wouldn't let you come to the midwives when Hema's goats were birthing. You never asked why she made you wear gloves when she was dying. You never asked why Papa used to take you out past the south field when you were 3 and you were 6 and you were 9 and stand there with you in the dark and not tell anyone. He was teaching you to hold it, Lie. Papa was teaching you to hold it because Mama's mother could do what you can do, and Mama's mother was burned for it before Mama was old enough to remember her face. Papa knew. Mama knew. They didn't tell you because they were hoping it would thin out in you. It didn't. I knew it didn't the day you threw the rock. The rock. At the creek. When we were little. You threw a rock at the big willow, and the willow, Lie. That tree moved. She had no memory of this. She had no memory of this at all, and yet she believed him because there was a place in her that had been waiting her whole life to be told this, and the place opened under his voice like a hand. Why? She said. Why didn't you? I didn't want you to be afraid. I thought if you were careful, if you were small enough, if you just made yourself small, you could. I was wrong, Lie. I was so wrong. I should have taken you out of that village the day Mama died. I should have. Kael. Raze's voice, quiet from the doorway. Yes. Your uncle knows by now. I know. He'll send for her. I know, son. Raze's voice got a fraction softer. It surprised Lyra, that softness. He will not be kind. You need to say the thing before I take her up there. You need to say it now. Kael closed his eyes. Lie. Yes? The man who pulled me out of the river. He opened his eyes. Raze. He's not. This isn't a charity. He didn't drag me home because he's a good man, although I think in his way he is. He did it because his uncle, the man who runs this valley, needed leverage. Leverage. On the person who put the bolts in me. They've been trying to get to Duskmere for years, Lie. I am a piece of the way in. A survivor of the massacre. A witness. Someone who can swear in front of the other houses what Duskmere did at the river. That's why I'm alive. That's why I've been in this house 2 winters. Lyra looked at her brother. Her brother looked back. And me, she said. And you. I'm leveraged too. Lie. Say it. Kael's mouth trembled. Yes, because I'm the thing Duskmere wants. Yes. So now Raze's uncle has both halves of the trap. Lie. Is that yes too, Kael? Her brother did not answer. She stood up. Her legs almost did not hold her. She turned and she looked at Raze Thorne, and he had not moved from the doorway, and his yellow eyes had gone very still. And she understood that he had known she was going to ask this question, and he had known exactly when, and he had stood there and let her brother be the one to answer it. You said you'd bring me home to him. I did. You didn't say what the house was for. No, I didn't. Were you going to? Eventually. When? When telling you wouldn't make you run. She laughed. It came out ugly. It came out like the sound Elder Bram's staff had made on the flat stone. It came out like a thing that was going to hurt somebody if it kept going. Lyra, Kael said. Don't. Please, he's not. Don't. She turned back to her brother. She crouched by his pallet one more time. She took his good hand in both of hers. "I'm glad you're not dead," she said. "I'm glad. I'll be glad for the rest of my life. But I'm not going to be somebody's piece of leverage, Kale. Not his uncle's. Not his. Not yours. I'm not asking you to. I know." She squeezed his hand. "I know you're not. You never would. But the world is. And the world doesn't care what you're asking. Do you know how I got cast out of Ash Hollow? Hima's goats. Hima's goats, Kyle. Dead kids in a stall a mile from our house. She didn't even come to us first. She went to Bram. And Bram, who held me when I was a baby, he looked at me in that square and he didn't even look surprised. He looked relieved, like I'd finally given him the excuse. Somebody in that village sold you," she said. "And somebody in that village sold me. Maybe the same somebody. I used to think if I was quiet enough and careful enough and small enough, people would forget what I was. I'm done being small, Kyle. I'm done being careful in rooms where the people around me are not being careful with me." She stood up. She turned to Raze. "Take me to your uncle," she said. He tilted his head. "That's not what I expected you to say?" "I know. I expected the door. I thought about the door. The door is slow. Your uncle already knows I'm here. If I go out the door, somebody with a dog catches me in an hour, and then I'm his problem and yours and Duskmir's, and everybody spends the next week arguing about who owns me while I'm in a shed somewhere." She pulled her hood up over her hair. Her hands were, she noticed, not shaking. "I'd rather walk up there on my own feet. I'd rather look him in the face. If he wants to use me, he can tell me to my face, and I can decide what I'm going to do about it with all the information in the room." Raze was looking at her. The yellow of his eyes had gone a shade darker, somehow, although nothing in the room had changed. "You're angry?" "Yes. I told you not to get angry. You told me not to lose my temper. Those are different words." He looked at her for another long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right, Lyra Vane," he said. "We'll go up the hill. I'll go with you, and I'll tell you one thing for free because I owe you one thing at least." "What?" "When my uncle tells you what he wants from you, and he will, the answer you give him is not the answer that gets you killed. The answer you give him is the answer that buys you a week. Understand that when you open your mouth." "A week of what?" "A week of being alive in his valley. That's all you get at first. After a week, you get another week, if he likes you. After a month, maybe, you get to breathe without looking at the door." She thought about it. "Fine," she said. She bent to kiss her brother's forehead. He caught her hand as she straightened and held it tight. "Lie. He's not like Bram." "I know. He's worse." "Kale. He's worse, Lie. I know." They did not take the horses up the hill. Raze said it was because the path was bad. Lyra thought privately that it was because he wanted her on her feet, wanted the muscle of the climb under her, so that when she walked into the hall of Raze Thorne, she would already be tired, already be a little small, already be in that quiet, alert place that a body gets into when it has been climbing in the cold for half an hour. She let him walk her up anyway. She was learning already that this was how he worked, not by telling you things, but by arranging the ground so you learned them from the ground. People watched them go up. Nettle was back in the doorway of the house with the red door, her hand over her mouth, watching. The young man with the scar along his jaw had come to the bottom of the path and was standing there with the axe across his shoulders, not following, just watching. The old woman with the pipe had not moved from her bench. By the time they reached the stone shelf where the hall stood, Lyra's legs were burning and her ears were ringing and her lip had opened up again from the dry cold. The hall was bigger up close than it had looked from below. The pillars at the front were carved with the shapes she hadn't been able to read from the valley floor. Long bodies, long jaws, teeth and tails twined together, something like wolves and something not. The doors were open. 2 men stood at the doors. They wore leather and mail. They had long knives at their hips. They did not look surprised to see Raze. They did not look surprised to see her either, which was the first thing that made her stomach lurch. The inside of the hall was dim. Long fires ran down the center of the floor, 3 of them in pits. Banners hung from the rafters, dark ones with a sigil worked in pale thread. A wolf's head crossed with a broken spear. Men sat along benches on either side of the fires, eating or drinking or both. They went quiet in waves as Raze and Lyra walked down the length of the hall. Not all at once. In waves, the closest first, then the next, then the next. At the far end of the hall, on a chair that was not a throne, but was not quite a chair either, higher backed, darker wood, carved with the same twined bodies as the pillars, sat a man. He was older than Raze. 10 years, maybe 15. He had the same long black hair, but his was threaded with iron gray. He had the same sharp face, but the sharpness had gone a little loose at the jaw with age. And he had the same yellow eyes, only his were darker, a copper yellow, and something about them did not track right when they moved. They flicked to Raze. They flicked to Lyra. They flicked once, too fast, at a point about 4 inches to the left of her head, as if he were looking at something there. "Nephew?" he said. "Uncle, you brought the girl." "I brought the girl." Without asking. She was going to be taken in Carr's Ford. Asking first would have left her in a wagon going east. Vargan Thorne looked at Lyra. She made herself look back. She remembered Raze's voice in the clearing, saw it stand behind the word. And she found, a little to her surprise, that she could. "Lyra Vane," Vargan said. He rolled the name in his mouth like he was tasting it. "Sister of our good house guest Kael. Cast out of Ash Hollow last week for the murder of some goats, was it?" "I didn't kill her goats." "No, of course you didn't." He smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was not even trying to be one. "Do you know what you are, Lyra Vane?" A bad question. Let me ask a better one. Do you know what you're worth?" She did not answer. "I'll tell you," Vargan said. "You are worth, at this moment, to me, the life of a man I have been hunting for 9 years. You are worth, at this moment, to Oral Duskmere, rather more than that. You are worth, at this moment, to yourself, exactly as much as you can make yourself worth, starting the moment you walk through that door. My nephew has told you, I hope, not to expect hospitality." "He said a week." Vargan's eyes went to Raze, one eyebrow lifted. "A week," Vargan said. "Generous of him, generous of you, nephew." "She was honest with me in the valley." "Honest? A pretty word." Vargan looked back at Lyra. "A week, then. Shall we say, a week of your life in exchange for my not sending a rider to Duskmere this afternoon with your location. In that week, you will do 3 things. Are you listening?" "Yes." 1. You will prove to me that what is in your blood is real and is what I believe it to be. Not by parlor tricks. By need. I will put you in a place where you will either use it or die, and I will watch which you do. Her stomach turned over. 2. You will swear, before the fires in this hall, before the men at these benches, that if Oral Duskmere comes into this valley looking for you, you will stand at the front of my line and you will burn him off the face of it. She could not speak. She nodded once. 3. Vargan leaned forward. His eyes caught the firelight and threw it back in a way that was not right. You will remember, every morning when you wake up in the guest house by the river with your brother, that you are here because I allow it. Not because my nephew likes you, not because your brother loves you, because I allow it. And what I allow, I can unallow. And the line between the two is thinner than the skin over your throat. Do you understand me, Lyra Vane? Yes. Say it, out loud, in this hall, in front of these men. She felt Raze very still beside her. She thought of her mother, dead in the fever bed, hiding 3 copper bits under the loom. She thought of her father, teaching a 3-year-old girl to hold it at the edge of the south field in the dark, because he'd known what she was when no one else had yet. She thought of Kael, alive, in a house with a red door, with a bent arm and a beard, and her mother's eyes. I understand, she said, that I am here because you allow it. The hall was silent. Vargan sat back. He smiled. This one was a little closer to being an actual smile, which was worse. Good, he said. Tomorrow, at dawn, we begin the first thing. Sleep well in my valley tonight, Lyra Vane. Raze did not speak to her on the way down the hill. He did not speak to her when they passed Nettle in the doorway, who was crying openly now and did not try to hide it. He did not speak to her when Kael, half risen from his pallet, said her name as she came through the red door. He did not speak to her as she crossed the room to her brother, and knelt, and put her forehead against his shoulder, and let out a breath she had been holding since the doors of the hall. Only at the threshold, with his hand on the jamb, about to step out and leave them, did Raze Thorne speak. "Lyra." She looked up. "The first thing," he said. His voice was lower than she had heard it, rougher. "Dawn. I'll come for you. Eat tonight. Sleep if you can. Don't argue with your brother about anything. Don't argue with Nettle about anything. Tomorrow morning, when you walk out of this house, you walk out with nothing on your face but what you want them to see. Yes?" "Yes." He nodded. "Once." "What is the first thing?" she said. He looked at her a long moment. "He's going to put you in the pit with an animal," he said. "And he's going to see what you do." He closed the door behind him. The fire popped. Somewhere outside a dog barked. Kale's hand came down on the back of her head, heavy, warm, alive, and Lyra Vane, cast out of Ash Hollow, daughter of a smith and a fever-killed mother, sister of a boy she had buried in her head and now could not ever again, closed her eyes in her brother's arms, and for the first time in 6 days, she let herself shake. Outside, the sun was going down behind the black pines of the wildlands, and somewhere in a valley she could not see, on a horse she could not hear, a man in a gray cloak was turning east toward a darker road. She did not sleep much. Nettle brought her a bowl of stew that was mostly root vegetable and a piece of dark bread with hard butter, and Lyra ate it at Kael's pallet, with her legs crossed under her and her knee pressed against her brother's good one. Nettle did not eat. Nettle sat on a low stool by the fire and watched Lyra chew as if she were watching a woman condemned to hang eat her last supper. After a while, Lyra could not stand it. "Stop looking at me." "I'm sorry. I'm eating, that's all. That's all I'm doing." "I'm sorry," Nettle said again, and turned her face to the fire, and Lyra understood that the girl was not being cruel. The girl had already, in her head, buried her. That was the look. It was a look Lyra knew well. It was the same one Hema Oster had given her in the square before the staff came down. Kale touched her wrist. "Tell me again," he said. "I already told you. Tell me again." "He said he'd put me in the pit with an animal. He said he wanted to see what I did." "And Raze said what?" "Raze said to sleep. Raze said to eat. Raze said nothing on my face tomorrow that I didn't want there." Her brother's jaw moved under his beard. "He's using you." "I know. He's using you the way Bram used you. The way all of them." "Kael." She set the spoon down. "I already know. I worked it out about a mile up the hill when he made me walk instead of ride. He's not a nice man. Nobody in this valley is a nice man. I'm not asking him to be nice to me. I'm asking him to keep me alive long enough to decide what I want to do next. That's not enough. It's what I've got. Lie. If he puts you in that pit, he's going to." "There's no if. There's what's in there. A bear. A wild dog. A wolf. They do this. It's how they read strangers. They did it to me. They did it to you?" He opened his mouth and closed it, and something closed behind his eyes, and she understood that there was a piece of his 2 winters in this valley he was not going to tell her. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. "I wasn't what they wanted," he said, finally. "They pulled me out at the end, but yes, they did." "What did you do?" "I bled. A lot. I hit the thing in the eye with a stone. I prayed." He caught her look. "In my head, Lie. Not out loud. Not here. And they pulled you out." "They pulled me out, but only because my uncle, Vargan I mean, had already decided I was useful. If he hadn't, they'd have let the bear finish it." "So what?" she said. "You want me to be useful." "I want you to be alive." "Kael, I want you to be alive, Lie." His voice had cracked. She looked at him. At the man her brother had become in 2 winters on a pallet in a stranger's valley, at the bent arm, at the scar on his nose, at his gray-green eyes that used to glitter when he was 15 and he was sneaking out to kiss the miller's daughter, and she thought, with a clarity that was almost painful, that she could not afford to let her brother's fear get into her bones tonight. She took his hand. She turned it over. She kissed his palm, the way their mother used to do with both of them when they were small and sick. "I'll be alive tomorrow," she said. "I promise." "Lie." "I promise, Kael." He nodded. His eyes were wet again. She made herself look away so she wouldn't cry too. She lay on a pallet on the other side of the fire, and she listened to her brother breathe and Nettle breathe and the fire breathe, and she did not sleep. She watched the rafters. The house's rafters were blackened with old smoke and hung with bundled herbs she didn't recognize. One of them was a long, thin bunch of something gray-green that Nettle had hung upside down by the hearth, and Lyra stared at it for a long time without understanding what it was. Somewhere around the middle of the night, the thought came up. I could run. Raze had made the door sound like a trap. But the door was only a trap if the valley had teeth on every side, and she had not seen all the sides yet. There was the river. There was the path up into the pines the way they'd come. There was the stockade, which wasn't even complete. If she slipped out now quietly, with the knife in her boot and the bread Nettle had left on the table, she could be out of the valley before dawn. She could go back into the hills alone and try to live. She thought about it for a long time. She thought about the wolves in those hills. She thought about the man in the gray cloak from the inn and how easy it had been for him to find her once she'd come off the south road. She thought about her brother, whose life in this valley was borrowed, whose life had been bought with the promise of her arrival, although he had not said that, and would not say it, because he couldn't bear to. If she ran, Vargan would not let Kyle stay in the house with the red door. If she ran, Vargan would send a rider to Duskmere anyway, to make something of the morning he'd wasted. If she ran, her brother, who she had walked 180 miles to find, would die in this valley within the week, and she would not even know which day. She stopped thinking about running. She got up, she went outside. The valley at night was not as quiet as she had thought it would be. There was the river down below. There were the small night sounds of animals that weren't afraid of people. Some kind of owl far off, calling twice and then waiting. There was, somewhere up the hill, the distant unsteady rhythm of drums. Not a music, a marking. A kind of slow, irregular tapping that made the base of her skull feel like it was being touched. She looked up at the hall of Raze Thorne. Light came out of its high, narrow windows. There was still a fire going in there. There were still men in there. She wondered if any of them were sleeping tonight. You'll get cold. She didn't startle. She had known somehow that he was there. She did not know how she had known. That was going to be a thought she would come back to. I don't mind. Raze stepped out of the shadow of the house with the red door. He must have been leaning there for some time. He had a blanket over one arm. He held it out to her. She did not take it. Wrap up, he said, or go inside. I'm fine. You're shaking. She looked down at her hands. They were, in fact, shaking. She hadn't noticed. She took the blanket. She put it around her shoulders. He leaned his hip against the corner of the house and crossed his arms, and they stood there, the two of them, looking down at the dark river. Is there really a pit? She said. Yes. Is there really an animal? There's usually a bear. A bear. A young one. My uncle isn't a sportsman. He doesn't bring in grown males to kill people. He brings in yearlings. They're big enough to hurt you, small enough that you might do something about it. Have people died? Some. Recently. He did not answer. How many people passed this test, Raze? Not many. Give me a number. 6 in my lifetime, out of maybe 30. 30? You watched 24 people die in a pit. I didn't say I watched, but some. She stared down at the river. Her eyes had gone past wet. They had gone into that hot, dry place that eyes go when there aren't any tears left, just the pressure of them. I won't pass it, she said. If I try to be what he wants, I won't do it, Raze. I don't know how. Last spring, that time, I didn't do anything. It did itself. You can't go into a pit hoping a thing will do itself. I know. So what do I do? He was quiet. I don't know, Lyra. She turned her head to look at him. In the dark, with only starlight, his yellow eyes had gone black, like everyone else's. That's not an answer. It's the truest one I have. I can tell you how pits work. I can tell you how my uncle thinks. I can tell you what some of the people who lived did, but I can't tell you what the thing inside you does because it isn't mine. I've been trying to understand it for 2 winters, and I don't. 2 winters, since your brother came out of the river. He shrugged, a small jerk of his shoulders. Kyle told me about you the first night he was awake. Feverish. Half out of his head. He kept asking me to promise I wouldn't let anyone come for his sister. I promised. Then I spent the next 2 winters figuring out what he was so afraid of. The man in black from the ferry crossing was one part of it. The thing in your blood was the other. It took me a year to find out Duskmir's name. It took another year to find out what he wanted. By the time I had it all, the village was already moving against you, and I couldn't get there in time. You got there in time. I got to Carr's Ford in time. That's different. It's close enough. He didn't answer that. A long silence. Raze. Your uncle. Yes. When he looks at me, his eyes don't track right. Raze went very still. What do you mean? When he looked at me in the hall, his eyes moved, but sometimes they looked at me, and sometimes they looked at a thing about that far. She held her hand up, a little to the left of her head, from my face, like there was something next to me he was watching, except there wasn't. Raze was silent for a long time. Don't tell him you saw that, he said, finally. Don't tell anyone else that you saw that. Why? Because what you saw is something he has spent a great deal of trouble making sure nobody in this valley knows he can do. His eyes aren't broken, Lyra. He was looking at what's next to you. There's nothing next to me. To you? No. To him, yes. There's a shape. He's one of the few men I have ever known who can see it. That is one of the reasons he has the chair he has. That is one of the reasons you want to be careful what he thinks he sees. She felt something cold go down the back of her neck that had nothing to do with the wind. A shape. A shape. Of what? Of what you are. Go to sleep, Lyra, or sit by the fire, but stop standing out here. The drums are getting closer. She had not noticed. They were. The slow tapping from up the hill had, in the last few minutes, slid a half step closer. Not louder, but closer, as if the drummers were walking down. She went back inside. Raze came for her at dawn. He did not knock. He did not need to. Lyra was already up, dressed in the clean shirt and breeches Nettle had laid out on the stool. They fit badly. They had been a boy's clothes and were loose through the shoulders and tight over the hips, but the fabric was clean and dry, and the boots Nettle had found for her fit. And her hair was tied back with a strip of leather. Her face was empty. She had practiced the empty face in the beaten piece of tin Nettle had let her use as a mirror. It had not been hard. She had worn it most of her life. Kyle tried to stand. He made it halfway off the pallet before his bent arm gave, and he sat back down hard, and Lyra went to him and pressed her forehead to his, and neither of them spoke. Don't come out, she said. You don't need to see it. Please. Please. He closed his eyes. He nodded. Nettle was by the door, silent, pale. Lyra paused as she passed her, and on an impulse she could not have explained she reached out and laid her hand very briefly on the girl's cheek. Don't cry yet, she said. I haven't given you a reason. Nettle made a small broken sound. Lyra walked past her out the door. Half the valley was up. They lined the path from the house with the red door up the slope. Not all of them were watching her. Some of them were working carrying baskets, splitting wood, pretending this was a morning like any other, but all of them knew, and Lyra could tell which ones knew, because the working ones had that deliberate not-looking quality that a body takes on when it is more aware of you than it wants to be. The young man with the scar along his jaw was at the foot of the slope. He was not working this morning. He was leaning on his axe, and when Lyra passed him, he spoke very quietly without looking at her. Good luck, ghost girl. Raze's shoulders tightened ahead of her. He did not turn. Lyra did. What did you call me? The young man lifted his eyes. They were gray, almost silver, and he was handsome in a rough way, and he knew it. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. Ghost girl, he said, the one he dragged in yesterday. Humans don't last in the pit. You'll be a ghost by noon. Lyra, Raze said low. Come on. What's your name? Tor. Yes. If I'm standing at noon, Lyra said, I'm going to remember you said that. Tor laughed. It was the kind of laugh that assumed it was going to be the one still laughing in an hour. That's fine, ghost girl. I'll be right here. Raze put his hand on her elbow. Not hard, She shrugged it off anyway, but she kept walking. You couldn't have just walked past him. He called me a name. People are going to call you names, Lyra. A lot of names. If you stop to answer everyone, I didn't stop to answer. I stopped to make him remember he said it. Raze looked at her sideways as they climbed. That's different, he said finally. All right, that's different. What? The pit was behind the hall, on the stone shelf, where the ground fell away into a long, narrow cut, maybe 15 feet deep and 20 feet across. Someone had built up a wooden palisade along the top of it so people could stand and watch. A set of stone steps, uneven and old, led down into it. At the far end of the pit was a barred wooden door set into the living rock. Behind the door, something big was moving. Lyra could hear it breathing, slow, patient, heavy. Vargan Thorne was already there. So were about 30 men and women. Some of them wore the dark leather and mail of the hall. Some of them wore ordinary clothes. Lyra looked at their faces briefly, and she saw, with a small and terrible clarity, that not all of them wanted her to die. A few of them looked troubled. A woman of maybe 40 with long gray braids was looking at Lyra the way a mother looks at a stranger's child about to cross a broken bridge. An old man at Vargan's right had his mouth pressed into a hard, unhappy line. But they were here. They had all come, and none of them was going to stop it. Lyra Vane, Vargan said. Yes. Down the steps. I'll tell you the rules from up here. I'm told you're a careful listener. I hope so. This is the only time I say them. She walked to the top of the steps. She did not look at Raze. She could feel him behind her, a pace back, not quite close enough to touch. Rules, Vargan said. 1. No weapons. The knife in your boot. Hand it up. She hesitated. A woman in the watching crowd made a small, scornful sound. Hand it up, Lyra Vane. We searched the Red Door house last night. We know what you have. She bent. She pulled the knife out of her boot. She walked back a few paces and handed it, hilt first, to Raze. He took it without looking at her. 2, Vargan said. When the door opens, what comes out, comes out. You do not run up the steps. If you run up the steps, you will find them no longer there. I had them pulled. Lyra turned slowly and looked. The stone steps ended now, 10 feet below the lip of the pit. She had not heard them move. She had not seen anyone move them. She looked up at Vargan, and his mouth had that same smile on it that had not been a nice one in the hall. 3. The bear will not die. The bear will go back into its pen at the end, alive. If you touch it with steel, you forfeit. If you try to climb the wall, you forfeit. If you beg for mercy, you forfeit. Forfeit means Duskmere gets a letter this afternoon. What do I have to do? Stand. That is all. Stand until I say stop. That is the test. For how long? Until I'm satisfied. She looked at him. She looked at his copper eyes, which were now this close, visibly tracking something just to the left of her head, a thing that she could not see. She did not ask him what he was looking at. She did not have to. And if I pass, then we begin to talk, Lyra Vane, about the second of the 3 things. She went down the steps. The pit floor was dirt packed hard by years of feet. Stones the size of a man's skull had been piled along the wall opposite the barred door, and she saw dark patches on some of them, old brown patches, and she did not let her eye linger. She stood near the center. She turned to face the door. Above her, a horn went off, short, flat, ugly. The door slid up. The bear came out slow. It was, Raze had said, a yearling, but it was bigger than she had let herself imagine. Brown-black, with a ruff of longer fur at the shoulders and a head as broad as her 2 hands. It stood in the doorway of its pen for a long second, blinking. Its eyes were small. Its breath smelled, even from across the pit, of meat and fear. Someone had not been kind to it. She saw the welts on its flanks. It came down into the pit in a loose, loping, 4-legged walk. It did not charge. It did not roar. It looked around the pit, at the steps that didn't reach, at the rocks, at her. And it made a small chuffing sound and lowered its head and shook itself like a wet dog. Then it looked at her. Then it came, not at a run, at a fast, rolling walk that became a half charge on the last 4 yards, and Lyra had enough time to see its eyes were not angry. They were confused and tired, and they wanted this to be over with, and she stepped sideways hard, and the bear went past her and hit the rock pile with its shoulder and turned. It turned faster than she thought it could. It was on her in 2 strides. She got her arm up and it hit her arm. It was like being hit with a log. She went down. She felt her shoulder go. Not dislocate, not quite, but wrench. And she felt the bear's breath on her face, hot and wet. And she felt a paw come down on her chest with an enormous patient weight. And she heard distantly the watching crowd go quiet. She did not scream. She did not beg. She could not get any breath in, so perhaps those 2 things had made themselves true. The bear opened its mouth over her face, and the thing in her blood moved. It was not fire. She had expected, later when she thought about it, that it would be fire, because fire was what the boys under the oaks had felt last spring. One of them had the scar still, a long, shiny ribbon down his cheek she'd heard from Tam before she left. It was not fire. It was cold. It was a spreading coldness that started in the palm of her left hand, which was pressed flat to the bear's shoulder, and it went up her arm and across her chest and through her throat. And when it came out of her mouth and her eyes, it came out as nothing anyone in the pit could see. But the bear saw. The bear felt. The bear lifted its head. Its small, tired eyes went wide. Its nostrils flared. Its paws, enormous on her chest, began to tremble. The weight of it came off her. Not because she had pushed it off. She had not pushed anything. She could not have pushed a door. But because the bear was backing up. Shuffling backward, on all fours, making a sound she had never heard an animal make, something between a whine and a cry, its head low and its eyes fixed on a place about 4 inches to the left of her head. It saw the shape. It saw what Vargan Thorne saw, and it was more afraid of that than of anything its handlers had done to it. Lyra rolled onto her side. Her arm didn't work. Her chest didn't work. She breathed painfully, once, twice. She made herself sit up. She made herself stand. The bear was backing toward the open door of its pen. Then it was in the pen. Then it was at the back of the pen, pressed against the wall, head low, ears flat, and it was making that sound still, very quietly, the way a beaten dog makes it. Lyra turned, slowly, to look up. 31 people looked back. Nobody moved. She could hear her own breath. It sounded enormous. "I'm standing," she said. Her voice did not carry the way she had wanted it to. Her voice came out small and ragged. It did not matter. The pit was silent enough that it reached them anyway. "Am I standing long enough yet, Vargan Thorne?" A woman in the crowd, the gray-braided one, made a sound like a laugh and then clapped her hand over her mouth. A man at Vargan's right said something into Vargan's ear. Vargan did not move. He was looking at her, or, more precisely, he was looking at the thing to the left of her head, and whatever he saw there had, for the first time since she had met him, taken the smile off his face. "Close the door," he said. "Someone close that door." 2 handlers scrambled to slide the pen door down. The bear went to the back of the pen and put its face in the corner. "Get her out," Vargan said. They lowered a rope. She climbed it with one arm. Raze caught her at the top and nearly dropped her. Her feet would not quite find the stone. He put an arm under her shoulder and held her upright, and she did not look at him, because she did not trust her face, and she turned instead to face Vargan Thorne, who was standing maybe 10 paces off with his copper eyes still fixed on the space beside her. "First thing," she said. "Yes." "Done." "Yes." "Second thing, you said in front of the fires and the men. Do I swear it now?" Vargan did not answer. He was still looking past her. She saw very clearly that he was not thinking about the oath. He was thinking about what he had just seen. "Vargan Thorne." "Yes." "Second thing." The old man at Vargan's right said quietly, "My lord, maybe we should—" "Not now, Orin." "My lord, if—" "Not now." The old man shut his mouth. Vargan finally, visibly, pulled himself back into his own eyes. He actually looked, at Lyra. His face was doing a thing she had never seen anyone do before. It was not quite fear, it was not quite hunger. It was something that sat in the space where those 2 things meet, the way a wolf sits at the edge of a fire. "You're not what I thought you were," he said. It came out low. It did not come out for her. It came out for himself. "I'm what was in the letters Raze brought you." "No." "No?" "No, Lyra Vane. The letter said a girl with a gift. The letter said something hot that answers to fear. What you have is not a gift. It is not something hot. What you have... He broke off. He looked once more at the space to the left of her head. Is old. It is not supposed to still be here. Its kind was supposed to have ended a long time ago. Its kind. Yes. What kind? What? Vargan did not answer her. He turned to the old man at his right. Oren. The archive. The shelf under the window. The black one with the iron strap. Bring it down. My lord. Now, Oren. The old man went. The crowd did not go. They stood there on the stone shelf, 30-odd of them, watching Lyra the way they had watched the bear come out of its pen, except now she was the one at the end of the leash, and they did not know whose hand it was in. Raze's fingers were tight on her arm. Lyra, he said, low. What? Don't answer anything else until we see what's in the book. I wasn't going to. He glanced at her. His yellow eyes were, she realized with a small shock, wary, not of the bear, not of the crowd, of her. Raze. You see it too now, don't you? See what? The shape. The thing to the left of my head. A long pause. Yes. When did you start seeing it? About a minute ago. In the pit? Yes. What does it look like? He did not answer. Raze, what does it look like? Don't make me tell you in front of them, Lyra. Her stomach turned. Eat. The old man, Oren, came back carrying a book that was longer than his forearm and wider than his hand. It was bound in some dark hide and strapped shut with iron. A lock held the strap. Oren put the book on a flat rock at Vargan's knee, and Vargan took a small key from around his own neck and unlocked the strap and opened the cover. The book inside was not printed. It was hand-copied in brown ink on parchment that had gone the color of weak tea. The pages had drawings on them. Animals, shapes, people with things around them, figures standing beside figures, one solid, one drawn in fainter lines, like a shadow cast by the wrong sun. Vargan turned the pages carefully. He was looking for something. He stopped. He looked at the page. He looked up at Lyra. He looked back at the page. Oren. My lord. Read it. Oren bent over the book. He cleared his throat. He spoke in a voice that was old but surprisingly clear, the voice of a man who had read aloud to many people in his life. The last of the bonded, he read. They walked among us before the breaking. Not shifter, not human. A third thing, whose shape is two shapes, whose blood is twin. When one is born, the other rides with her. The other cannot be seen, except by the bonded's own people and by the dying. The bear kneels to her. The wolf does not hunt her. The old names wake in her throat. She is not a gift. She is a debt the earth made and forgot to pay. Oren stopped. Go on, Vargan said. That's all there is, my lord. The rest of the page was cut out, centuries ago by the look. By who? By us, my lord, I think. Vargan's copper eyes came up to Lyra. Lyra Vane, he said quietly. Do you know what your mother was? A weaver. Before that, a farmer's daughter. Before that, my grandmother, she was burned in, yes, burned. Where? I don't know, somewhere south. She never told Mama where. Was there anyone in your family, ever, who could do what you can do? My grandmother, or so Kale says. I never met her. And your father? A smith. And before him? I don't know. Vargan closed the book. Your father, he said, was not a smith. What? Your father was a smith in Ash Hollow. That is true. Before Ash Hollow, Evo Vane was something else. My brother, Raze's father, knew him. In a different place. Under a different name. She could not speak. My brother is dead. He died 9 years ago. He died in a house Oral Duskmere burned. Before he died, he told me that a man he had known in his youth, a man called Evo, had taken a wife from the Hollow country and gone south to hide, and that this man's daughter, if she ever came into her own, would not be a gift but a debt. What? It is an old phrase. Our old phrase, for something like you. Vargan looked at her. Your father was not a shifter, Lyra Vane. But he was not a man either. Not fully. Not the kind of man you imagine, sharpening knives in a forge for 20 years. Your father was a bonded. Vargan pointed at the book. What Oren just read to you, what you are, what that page said is the last of. Your father was one of them, and he came south to hide, and he married a woman with her own bloodline, and now you stand in my pit with a shape beside your head that my grandfather's grandfather might have seen once before he was a boy. That is what you are. That is what Duskmere has been hunting for a lifetime. And that is what I have just watched back down a bear in my stone pit on the second day of your life in my valley. The stone shelf was absolutely silent. The crowd had not moved. Some of them were not breathing. Lyra was distantly aware that her shoulder was starting to scream and that she could not feel 3 of her fingers. Lyra. That was Raze's voice, low, right behind her ear. Breathe, she breathed. Lyra Vane. That was Vargan. He had risen. He was standing on the stone shelf and looking down at her. And his copper eyes were no longer tracking something beside her head. They were tracking her. We will talk, he said, about the 3 things again. They're changed now. Changed. The first was to prove what was in your blood. You have proved more than I asked. The second was to swear against Duskmere. That oath stands, but not as it was. It is no longer an oath I demand. It is an oath I need from you freely, because what you are is worth more to him than I understood yesterday, and he will come faster than I thought, and harder. The third was to remember that you were here because I allowed it. Vargan paused. That one we will not speak of again. What do you want? She whispered. I want, Vargan said, to speak with you alone, in the hall, at sundown. I want my nephew with me. I want Oren with me. I want no one else. I want you to eat. I want you to sleep. I want you to understand that what you did in that pit I cannot unsee, and I cannot pretend to my men I did not see. By sundown there will be a rider out of this valley, Lyra Vane, and I do not know yet in which direction, because the rider I send depends on what you say to me between now and then. He turned and walked away. The crowd peeled back from him like water around a stone. Some of them were still staring at her. Some were staring at the place next to her head. The gray-braided woman made, very briefly and very small, a gesture against her collarbone that Lyra had seen her whole life, the horn sign, the warding off the dark sign. And then she flushed, deep red, and let her hand drop. And she was the first to turn and go. Raze got her back down the hill. He did not take her to the house with the red door. He took her to a smaller building behind it, a sort of shed that had been made into a sick room, with a single window and a straw pallet on a low wooden frame and a clay basin and a jug of water. Nettle was there. Nettle had a bowl of hot water and strips of clean linen and a small pot of something that smelled sharp and resinous, and she took one look at Lyra and went white. Put her on the pallet, Nettle said. Her voice had changed. It had gone quick and competent. It was the first time Lyra had heard her sound like anyone at all. Shirt off, her shoulders gone, her arm, Raze, hold her. I'm fine. You're not fine, put your shirt, I can take my own. Lyra, Raze said. Let her. She let her. She sat on the pallet with her arms over her head while Nettle peeled the shirt off, and Nettle made a small sharp sound when she saw the side of Lyra's chest. The print of the bear's paw was coming up, a bruise as broad as a dinner plate, and the skin over her collarbone had split where the bear's claws had caught her through the shirt. Blood had soaked the bandages around her right arm where she had not even known she was bleeding. Sit still. This is going to hurt. Raze, hold her. He held her. His hands were very warm. She was, she realized, cold. Her teeth were clicking. Nettle worked fast. She cleaned. She bandaged. She manipulated Lyra's shoulder back into place with a horrible sudden jerk that made Lyra see white for a second and bite her own lip open again. Nettle did not apologize. Drink this. It was some tea in a clay cup. It was bitter. It made her head go floaty. Not too much. You need to talk at sundown. Enough to take the worst off. How do you... I was listening from the path. Nettle's face twisted. Everyone was. Half the valley heard him say what he said. About my father. Yes. Lyra looked up at Raze. He was sitting on a low stool across from the pallet. He had his hands on his knees. His yellow eyes were on her, and they were, she realized now, a different color than they had been yesterday. The gold in them had thickened. The pupils were narrower. He looked, for the first time since she had met him, almost tired. Raze. Yes. Did you know about your father? Yes. No. Did your uncle know? Before today? He suspected. He did not know. The book. Oren has been reading that book to him for 9 years. I've seen that book before, Lyra. Once. He didn't want me to see it. I saw it anyway. That page with the cutout piece. He's been staring at it for a long time. So he brought me here to find out if I was the thing in the book. He brought you here to use you against Duskmere, but yes, if you turned out also to be the thing in the book, that was a bonus, I suppose. And you? What did you want? He looked at her. He looked at her for a long moment with those tired yellow eyes. I wanted, he said, to keep the promise I made your brother. Only that. At first. And now. He did not answer. Nettle stood up. She gathered her bowl and her cloths, and she went to the door. And at the door she paused, and she said without turning, Raze, she should sleep. You should go. In a minute, Nettle. Nettle hesitated. Then she closed the door behind her. Raze leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his long hands hanging loose between them. Lyra. What? Sundown. You are going to walk into the hall, and you are going to sit across from my uncle, and he is going to tell you what he wants, and the word he is going to use is going to sound very close to a bargain. It isn't. It's a door. On one side of the door, you live in this valley for the rest of your life, and you do what he asks, and your brother lives too. On the other side of the door, Duskmere. So it's no bargain at all. It is not. But there is a third door he will not tell you about. What? You walk out. She blinked at him. You walk out with me. Tonight. Before the rider goes. I put you on the black, and I put your brother in front of me on the gray, and I take you over the pass, and we are out of this valley before Vargan's men have finished their wine. To where? I don't know. North. Further. There are places in the high wildlands where the houses do not go. I know 2 of them. Neither of them is safe. Both of them are further from Duskmere than here. Why are you telling me this? He did not answer for a long time. Because, he said, finally, I brought you here thinking you were a girl with a hot hand and a dead mother and a brother who missed her. And I watched you put a yearling bear on its belly in a stone pit without moving. And whatever you are, Lyra Vane, you are not a thing I am going to hand over to my uncle because my uncle says so. Not anymore. He stood. He went to the door. At the door he stopped. Sleep, he said. Eat what Nettle brings. When she comes for you to walk you up to the hall at sundown, you walk. You sit. You listen. You do not say yes to anything. You do not say no to anything. You say, let me think until morning. Morning. That is the word. Vargan will give it to you if you ask for it. He cannot afford to look cruel right now. Not after what Oren just read in front of 30 people. He will give you the night. And then, Lyra, you decide if the third door is the one you want. Raze. Yes. The shape. Beside my head. He was still facing the door. He did not turn. Yes. What does it look like? A long breath out. It looks like you, he said. A little taller, a little older. Your face, your hair without the white streak. She is standing beside you, and she is looking at me, Lyra, with a kind of patience I have only ever seen on one other face in my whole life. And that face was my father's, and he was already dying when I saw it. He opened the door. He closed the door behind him. Lyra lay on the pallet in the sick-room shed in the valley of Raze Thorne, and she stared at the rough rafters over her head, and she heard very clearly something breathe out beside her left ear, a soft, calm, patient exhalation like a woman waking from a long sleep, and she did not look. She did not dare to look. Outside, on the stone shelf above the valley, the drums had started again, and this time they were not slow, and this time they were not irregular, and they were coming down. She did not look, but she spoke. Are you there? The exhalation beside her ear did not answer. It did not repeat. It did not have to. Lyra lay on her side on the pallet with her bandaged arm across her ribs and her eyes fixed on a knot in the beam above her head, and she understood, the way you understand that the sun is up even before you open the curtain, that whatever had just breathed beside her was not a wind, not her own breath bounced off the wall, not the tea. I can feel you. Nothing. Papa, she said, and her voice cracked on the word, and she hated that. Papa, if this is the thing that was in you, silence. A long, listening silence. Not hostile. Not warm, either. The silence of someone who was waiting to see what she would do. She closed her eyes. The tea was pulling her down. Her shoulder was pulsing with its own heartbeat, separate from the one in her chest. She thought, from a long way off, I should be afraid of this. And she was surprised to find that she wasn't, not quite. What she felt was something stranger, a kind of recognition, like coming back into a room she had left a long time ago and finding her own cup still on the table. She slept. She dreamed her father was in the forge. He was at the anvil with his back to her, and he was not hammering. He was just standing there with the hammer in his hand and his head bent. The fire behind him was low. The shop smelled of iron and char, and the cold, wet spring mornings Lyra had spent at his knee, picking up small fallen things and putting them in his toolbox. Papa. He didn't turn. Papa, they said you weren't. I know what they said. His voice was not the voice she remembered. It was rougher, deeper. It had a note under it like someone else was speaking in the next room. Is it true? He turned then. He looked at her. Ivo Vane, her father, with his heavy shoulders and his gray-flecked beard and the small puckered burn on his forearm where a spark had taken him when Lyra was 4, looked at her and smiled, and his eyes were not his eyes. They were yellow, pale yellow, with gold in them. Lyra. Your eyes. Yes. You never. No. We don't show them. Not to anyone. Not even to the women we love. We hide them under something quieter. Your mama knew, at the end. I told her. She didn't mind. She didn't. Your mama was brave, Lyra. Braver than you knew. And she sent you away from the midwife's house for a reason, and she made you wear the gloves for a reason, and the day you threw the rock at the willow, she cried in the pantry. Not because she was ashamed, but because she knew what was coming for you, and she didn't know how to stop it. You left me. I died. You left me, Papa. You went and you died, and you left us with her, alone, and Mama was sick, and Kyle was too young, and Bram was already... I know. Do you? Do you know what it was like? Yes. He said it simple. He said it flat. I know, Lyra. I watched. You're going to hate me for that, and I don't blame you. But I watched. She looked at him. In the dream, her eyes were dry. All her crying had happened back in the sickroom shed, in the real world, without her noticing. The thing beside my head. Yes. Is she you? No, she is hers. Every bonded gets one. They come up when the body is ready. She was waiting in you since before you were born. I'm what she uses to talk to you tonight, because my face is a face you'll listen to. What does she want? To live, Lyra. Same as you. Only she has been waiting a very long time, and she has forgotten that waiting is not the same as being dead. Papa, listen to me. Listen. He stepped closer to her. The smell of him, hot iron, linseed oil, the sour sweet of a man who worked in heat all day, closed around her like the memory of an embrace. The man in the hall tonight is going to offer you a bargain. It will look like a cage. It will be a cage. But the man in the black cloak, Duskmere, he is a different kind of cage, and a worse one. And the difference is this. Vargan wants to use you. Duskmere wants to open you. I don't know what that means. You don't need to know yet. You need to know that there is a difference. And you need to know that the third door my nephew will offer you, he's not your nephew, he's Vargan's. He is in the family your father married into, Lyra. He is my nephew by the marriage bond. That is how we count it. She stared at him. The third door, Ivo said, is not safe either. Don't choose it because the man with yellow eyes asks you to. Choose it because it's the door that leaves you with yourself at the end of the night. That is the only reason to choose any door. One more thing. What? When the drums get to the hall tonight, Lyra, don't be in the hall. What? Don't be in the hall. Listen for them. They've been coming down since before dawn. Papa, wake up. Mag. She woke up. It was still daylight. The window of the shed was a square of hard gray sky. Her mouth tasted of bitter tea and blood. Her shoulder hurt, but it was a duller hurt than before. A deep ache rather than the white-hot pulse of earlier. She lay still for a long moment, listening. There were voices outside, low. 2 men. They were arguing. Have to bring her up early, Tor, I'm telling you. He said sundown. He said sundown before the drums. The drums aren't sundown drums, you idiot. I heard what he said. I was there. He said sundown, so I'm coming at sundown. Then you're a fool. Then I'm a fool who does what the old man tells him instead of what you tell me, Oren. Now step back before I... A scrape of boots. A sharp breath. Then Oren's voice, very cold, very small. Put that away, boy. Put it away, or I'll have you in the cold house for a week. Tor muttered something. A blade went back into its sheath. Lyra sat up. Her head swam for a second. She waited for it to settle. She swung her legs off the pallet. Her shirt was clean, one of Kael's old ones, and someone, Nettle, she guessed, had laid a dark wool overshirt on the foot of the bed. Her boots were by the door. Her knife, the one she'd handed up to Raze, was on top of the overshirt. She stared at the knife. Then she put the overshirt on, carefully, over the bandages, and she stood, and she picked the knife up and slid it into her boot, and she went to the door. She opened it a crack. Oren was standing there, stooped, hands folded in front of him. Tor was a few paces off, red in the face, his hand still near his sword hilt even though the sword was in its scabbard. Tor saw her and his jaw tightened. Oren saw her and his whole face changed. Not softened exactly, but gathered the way a man's face gathers when he has decided something. Miss Vane. Oren. Are you able to walk? Yes. Good. Walk with me. It's not sundown. No, it is not. He glanced at Tor. Tor, you may tell the hall that I have collected Miss Vane on the early side. If anyone objects, they may take it up with me. The old man, said Oren, will hear the objection from my mouth. You may go. Tor looked like he was going to argue. Then he looked at Oren's face, and he thought better of it, and he turned on his heel and went up the path toward the hall. Oren turned to Lyra. Will you walk with me? Where? Down to the river. There is a bench. It's quieter there than either the house or the hall, and there is something I would like to say to you that I would prefer no one overheard. She looked at him a long moment. All right. They walked slowly. He was an old man and his hip hurt. She was a hurt woman, and everything hurt. They made their way down the path past the house with the red door, where Nettle was standing in the doorway watching and did not call out to either of them, and along a smaller path that ran between 2 long houses to the water. There was a bench, as he'd said. It was a plank of pine set on 2 stumps. The river was loud here, running fast over stones. Lyra sat carefully, and Oren sat beside her slowly, and they watched the water for a while and did not speak. How long have you served Vargan? She asked finally. 31 years? You were with his father, too. Yes, and his grandfather when I was a boy. I have been in the hall longer than most of the men in it have been alive. Then why are you bringing me down to the river to say something no one can hear? Oren did not answer at once. He took a small carved pipe out of his coat and filled it with careful fingers and did not light it. He held it instead, and he turned it over in his hands, and he looked at the water. Because I am an old man, Miss Vane, and I have spent my life in service of a house that I believed in, and in the last 9 years that house has bent towards something I do not believe in anymore. Duskmere. Duskmere is the symptom, not the sickness. The sickness is in our own hall. His mouth tightened. Vargan's father was a hard man. He was not a kind man, but he was a man who understood that a house is a covenant between those who lead and those who are led. And when he broke that covenant, which he did more than once, he paid in his own currency. He did not send other men's sons to pay for him. Vargan does. Vargan has been sending other men's sons to pay for him for a decade, and the rest of us have been telling ourselves that he will stop. He won't. No, he won't. And now he has you, and he has the name in that book. And if he plays this correctly, and he is very good at playing things correctly, he will use you to get Duskmere, and then he will not let you go, because what you are is not the kind of thing a man like Vargan lets go. Lyra looked at the river. What do you want, Oren? I want you to be warned. That's it. No, that is not all of it. I want you to know that not every face you saw on that shelf this morning was the face of a man who will do whatever Vargan says tomorrow. He turned the pipe in his fingers. The woman with the gray braids, her name is Hessa. She lost a son at the river crossing where Duskmere killed your brother's company. She does not love my lord anymore, Miss Vane. She has not loved him for a long time. There are others. How many? Enough to matter, not enough to move. Not enough to move against him. Not yet. Her heart was beating faster. She did not let it show on her face. Whatever else Lyra Vane had learned to do in her 19 years, she had learned to keep the inside of her chest off the outside. Oren? Yes. Why are you telling me? Because. He looked at her. His eyes were faded blue, kind and tired. Because what the book said this morning was not a tale I read to him, Miss Vane. That was a tale he had me read in front of 30 witnesses because he needed them to hear it. He wanted them afraid of you. He wanted them to know that what is in you is old and not clean. He wanted to make sure that whatever bargain he strikes with you tonight, the men of the valley will not rise for you against him. They will see you as a thing, not a person. I know. You know. I've been that to someone my whole life, Oren. I know the shape of it when it comes. The old man looked at her for a long time. Then he nodded, slowly, and he put the unlit pipe back in his coat. Then I will tell you one thing more, and then I will take you up the hill. Because the drums are coming, Miss Vane, and what the drums mean is not what my lord thinks they mean, and I believe tonight he is going to learn something about his own valley that he will not like, and I do not want you to be in the hall when he learns it. What do the drums mean? Oren rose. He smoothed his coat. The drums mean, he said, that the mountain houses are sending a judgment down. Not to my lord, past him, to you. They have heard, Miss Vane, what happened in the pit this morning. They heard it from their own people who were in the valley when it happened, and they rode back up into the hills at noon, and the drums have been coming down since the moment they reached the first pass. The mountain houses do not send judgments often. The last time was 36 years ago. I was a man grown. I remember it. The judgment they send is not a sentence. It is an inquiry. They come to the hall. They ask questions. They decide among themselves whether the thing that has shown up in my lord's valley is to be kept by my lord, or taken to the mountain, or put down on the spot. She went cold. Put down. Yes. On the spot. It has happened. Once. And Vargan can't stop them. My lord, Oren said carefully, does not hold this valley against the mountain houses. He holds it with their permission. It is an old arrangement. If he were to stand in the hall tonight and tell them to turn around, they would turn around. And then, Miss Vane, they would come back in a month with 400 men and burn the valley to the river and hang my lord by his own belt from the pillar with the wolf on it. Then why is he? Because he does not yet know what they are going to decide. And because he believes, and this I suspect is true, that if he can get you to swear the oath before they arrive, he can walk out and meet them with you at his shoulder and say, she is already mine, she is already for the war, she is not yours to judge. And then their inquiry becomes a negotiation, and my lord is an excellent negotiator. Lyra stared at the water. So the early bargain? Yes. Sundown before the drums? Yes. He's trying to collar me before the mountain gets here. He is. And you don't want him to. No, Miss Vane. Why? Because he will collar you for one purpose and he will keep you for another. And because I am an old man and I have already done enough things in my life I will answer for, and I do not want one more of them on the list. She looked at him sideways. Oren, if I don't swear the oath, what happens? Then the mountain arrives. They ask their questions. They judge. They may take you up the mountain. They may kill you in the hall. They may, in their judgment, declare you bound to the valley and leave you here, in which case things proceed much as my lord hopes. There is no safe outcome. There is only a choice of who holds the end of the rope. And Raze's third door. Oren's face moved very slightly, a small lift of the eyebrows, a small tightening at the corners of his mouth. Ah, he said, the nephew has told you. He has. Then you know what I would have suggested. I would have put you on a horse an hour before sundown. I would have put your brother on another. I would have lit a fire in one of the empty longhouses, and then in another, so that the men on the north wall were watching fires and not a path. And I would have sent you up the pass with a sack of food and my own knife, and I would have stood at the hall door and lied to my lord's face, and I would have answered for it tomorrow. Why haven't you? Because my lord's nephew is faster than me, and because I am an old man, and because when I told my lord's nephew last night what I was prepared to do, he told me to stand down and let him do it. Said he had been waiting for this for a long time. Said he had promised it to a man with 3 crossbow bolts in him on a ferry bank 2 winters ago. Lyra closed her eyes. Raze. Yes, Miss Vane, Raze. Then why are we going to the hall at all? Because the nephew's plan needs a little more time than sundown will give him. And because, if my lord understands that I am delaying you, there is no future in this valley for any of us. Oren took her elbow, very courteously. Come. I will walk you up. I will walk slowly. I am an old man, and my hip is very bad today. He winked. For the first time since she had walked through the gate at Carr's Ford, Lyra almost laughed. She did not, but almost. The drums were louder on the way up. They did not sound like one set of drums now. They sounded like 4, spaced out along the ridgelines, calling each other down. The sound was not music, but it had a shape. A slow triple beat, answered by a slow double, answered by a single heavy thump. Lyra felt it in her teeth. Nettle came running down the path and stopped short at the sight of them. Oren, my lord sent for you. He said, I have collected Miss Vane early, as you can see. He's very... I will take her up. Go to the red door. Close it. Bar it. Do not open it until Raze comes. Do you understand me, child? Nettle nodded, white. Nettle, Lyra said, and paused, and found that there was nothing to say that would fit in a sentence. Instead, she reached out with her good hand and touched Nettle's cheek again, like she had that morning, and Nettle closed her eyes and turned her face into Lyra's palm for a fraction of a second, and then pulled away and ran, up the path, back toward the house with the red door, and Lyra watched her go, and the coal in her chest got a little hotter. All right, she said to Oren, take me up. The hall was darker in the afternoon than it had been in the morning. The fires in the pits had been let go low on purpose, and the windows had been shuttered on one side, and the benches were almost empty. Only a dozen of Vargan's men, standing rather than sitting, and Vargan himself at his high-backed chair with a cup in his hand that he was not drinking from. No Raze, no Hessa, no Tor either. Tor must have been sent on some errand to get him out of the hall for this. Vargan looked up as they came in. His copper eyes went past Lyra to Oren. You were late getting her. I was slow, my lord. My hip. You were late, Oren. I was slow, my lord. A silence. Vargan did not want to push it, not in front of his men, not with the drums doing what they were doing. Miss Vane, he beckoned, sit. There was a stool set before his chair. Not a chair, a stool, lower than his seat, deliberately lower. She saw the choice of furniture and she understood it. She walked to the stool. She did not sit. Miss Vane, I'll stand. I'll stand, Vargan Thorne. I've been knocked down enough today. A flicker in his eyes. Not quite anger. Something calculating it. He let it go. As you like. We don't have much time. Listen carefully. I'm listening. The oath I asked you for this morning. I am not asking for it in the form I used this morning. I am asking you for something larger, and in return I am offering something larger. Go on. You will take my name. She blinked. What? My name. Thorne. Not as a daughter. Not as a ward, as a kin claim. An adoption into the house. It is an old form. It has not been used in this valley for 3 generations. It does not require blood. It requires witnesses, and it requires that the person being claimed stand in the hall and say 3 words. I accept kin. That is all. Once said, it cannot be undone, and once said you are of the house of Thorne, and no man outside this valley can take you without first breaking the house. She stared at him. You, in return, he said, You will bind yourself to defend this valley against Oral Duskmere when he comes, and you will submit for the remainder of your life to the judgment of the head of House Thorne in all matters touching the thing in your blood. You are the head of House Thorne. I am. So I am binding myself to you. To the house, Miss Vane. It happens that I am the house at present. At present. At present. Her mouth had gone dry. She did not look at Orin. She did not look at the drum lines of men along the walls. She looked at Vargan, and she tried to read what was happening in his copper eyes. And for the first time, she was seeing him properly. Not the lord in the chair, not the man with the clever questions, but the thing underneath, the animal that had been watching her all day from behind his face. He was afraid of the drums. He was afraid, and he was trying to collar her before fear made a mistake in him. And the thing that had been watching her all day was not cruel, or not only cruel, it was hungry in the way a hungry man is careless, and that carelessness was a crack in him, and Lyra had spent her whole life learning to find the cracks in men like him. She thought of what her father had said in the dream. Don't be in the hall when the drums arrive. She thought of Orin's small, hip-limping smile at the bench by the river. She thought of Raze, somewhere outside, moving. She did not know where, she did not know how, but moving, because he had said he would, and because the third door was his and he wanted her through it. She thought of Kael behind the red door with the bar across it. She thought of the bear in the pit, backing away from something it could see and she could not. No, she said. The hall went quiet. Excuse me. No, Vargan Thorne. His jaw moved. Miss Vane. I won't say it. I won't say it now. I won't say it before the drums arrive. I won't say it at all, tonight. One of the men along the wall shifted his weight. A cup rattled on a bench where someone had set it down too hard. Miss Vane. Vargan's voice had gone quiet. The quiet was worse than a shout. I would ask you to think very carefully about the words you are about to follow that one with. I have. Have you? Yes. Then speak them. I will not take your name, not tonight, not like this. You offered me a collar at sunrise and a name at sundown, and the only thing that changed between them is that a drum started. I will answer you when the drums have spoken, not before. You will. I won't, Vargan. It was the first time she had said his name without the last name. It hung in the hall for a second, naked, and she watched it hit him, and she watched him decide in the span of a breath that he was going to stand up and have his men put her hands behind her back and force the words out of her. And she watched, at the same moment, something else happen to his face. His copper eyes tracked suddenly, not to the left of her head, but over her shoulder. They widened. His mouth came open. She turned. Hessa was standing in the doorway of the hall, the gray-braided woman. She had a long knife across her palms, held flat, the way a woman holds a thing to give, not to kill with. Behind her were maybe 8 people. 3 men, 5 women. They were not armed. They were just standing there. At the back of the little group, Lyra saw a face she had seen that morning in the pit crowd. The younger of the 2 handlers who had scrambled to close the bear pen's door, a boy of maybe 20 with a burn on one wrist. My lord, Hessa said. Hessa, get out of my lord, the drums are in the valley. I know they will be on this shelf within the hour. We have come to say something to you before they are. Vargan stood up. Get out of my hall. My lord? Get out. My lord, we will go. In a moment. Hessa did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Her voice carried in the dark hall the way a cold wind carries down a hill. We have come to say that if you put your hands on her before the drums speak, we will not stand with you when the mountain asks its questions. Not one of us. You will stand in the doorway of this hall and face the mountain alone. Vargan opened his mouth. Think before you speak, my lord. He closed his mouth. He looked at the group in the doorway. He counted them. Lyra watched him count them. 8. Then he looked at the men along the walls of the hall. 12. Then he looked, briefly, at Orin, who was standing beside Lyra with his hands folded, not moving, not speaking, his faded blue eyes perfectly calm. And she watched Vargan's face understand that the old man at his right hand for 31 years was not going to speak for him tonight. 12 men. Against 8 unarmed ones, yes. Those were not the numbers that mattered. The numbers that mattered were that 12 of his men had seen him hesitate, and Vargan Thorne had spent his whole life knowing what that meant. He sat back down. Hessa, my lord, you have something you want me to do. No, my lord, I have something I want you not to do. I want you not to put a collar on this girl tonight. And tomorrow. Tomorrow is tomorrow. Today is tonight, my lord, and tonight the mountain is walking down, and we are telling you that if you meet them with a collared woman beside you, we will not be the ones standing behind you. He looked at her for a long moment. Then very slowly, he turned his head to Lyra. Miss Vane. Yes. It appears, he said, that you have people in my hall who would prefer I did not take your name tonight. It appears so. Do you know them? Not yet. Have you spoken to them before? Once. In the pit crowd this morning. Have you spoken to her? He jerked his chin at Hessa. Before. No. Then you had no part in this. In what? In this delegation. No. He held her eyes for a long moment. She did not blink. His copper eyes tracked once to the space beside her head and back to her, and whatever he saw there the second time made a muscle in his jaw jump. He laughed once. It was not a happy laugh. All right, Miss Vane. All right. All right. No name tonight, no oath tonight, no bargain tonight. We will let the drums speak. We will let the mountain ask its questions. And tomorrow, if you and I are both still alive, we will talk about this again. Agreed. Hessa. My lord, get out of my hall. Take your delegation. If I see any of your faces on the stone shelf when the mountain arrives, I will be very put out. Yes, my lord. Hessa bowed. A small, stiff bow, the bow of a woman who had just bent a man and did not want him to know she knew she had. And she turned and walked out, and the 8 of them went with her. The boy with the burn on his wrist was the last. At the doorway, he paused, looked back, and met Lyra's eyes. He did not smile. He made a small gesture with 2 fingers at the hollow of his throat. A sign. An old one. She did not know what it meant, but it was a sign, and it was not the horn sign, and it was not against her. Then he was gone. Vargan did not speak for a long time. He sat in his chair and he stared at his hands. His men along the wall did not move. Oren, beside Lyra, was breathing very slowly, the way a man breathes when he is trying not to let his chest show how fast his heart is. Miss Vane? Yes. Go. Where? Down to the house with the red door. Bar the door. Stay there until the drums come. When they come out. Stand on the step of the house. Do not come up the hill. Do not come into the hall. Wait for them on the step. Oren will come down for you when it is time. Do you understand me? Yes. One more thing, Miss Vane. She waited. When the drums arrive, he said, my nephew will not be in this hall. She did not answer. Did you know that? I suspected it. He looked at her. He looked, she realized, almost amused. A small corner of his mouth had turned up. It was not a kind expression, but it was not the hungry one either. I underestimated you this morning, Lyra Vane. A lot of people have. Yes. Well, you have all afternoon to think about whether you underestimate yourself. I don't. He lifted his cup, the cup he had not drunk from since they came in, and finally he drank. Go, he said, before I remember how much I dislike being told no in my own hall. She walked out of this hall on her own feet. Oren walked with her as far as the stone shelf. On the shelf, he stopped, and he laid his old hand very briefly on her shoulder, the good one, not the bandaged one, and he did not speak. He just nodded once. Then he turned and went back inside. The wind was up, the drums were close. She could see now on the far ridge a line of torches, and they were moving down in a steady order, like beads on a string, and there were more of them than she had let herself count. She went down the path. Hessa was waiting halfway down. The other 7 were gone, sent off, Lyra guessed, by whatever quick word Hessa had given them at the door. Hessa stood alone on the path, with her long knife back on her hip, and her gray braids blowing loose in the wind, and her face was unreadable. Lyra stopped. They looked at each other. I don't know you, Lyra said. No. You lost a son. I did. At the river crossing. Yes. I'm sorry. Hessa's mouth tightened. Don't be sorry for me, girl. I didn't come down to that hall for you. I came down because my lord forgot that the valley is not only his, he has been forgetting that for a long time. The fact that what is good for you is also what reminds him is convenient. Convenient. Yes, but not kind. No, not kind. Hessa's gray eyes softened a quarter of an inch. Kind is something we will be to each other after the mountain goes home, if you are still here and I am still here. Not before. All right. Go down, bar the door, and tell your brother, yes. Tell your brother that Hessa of the Longhouse said his sister stood up in Vargan's hall and said no to a caller. Tell him I was there. Tell him Yaron's mother was there when his sister said it. Yaron, my son. I'll tell him. Hessa nodded. She walked past Lyra, up the hill, toward the hall. Lyra watched her go for a second, then turned and went down. The path down the slope was quiet. The valley was quiet. The drums were close enough now that the ground under her boots was shaking very faintly with them. She could see the torches across the valley mouth, a long, moving line of orange in the dusk, and she thought, with a kind of small, distant clarity, they are coming. They are really coming. And I am walking toward them on my own feet. She reached the house with the red door. Nettle had barred it from the inside. Lyra had to knock. 4 knocks. A pause. 2 knocks. The rhythm Nettle had made her learn that morning. The bar scraped. The door opened. Kyle was on his feet. He was not supposed to be on his feet. He had his hand on the wall and his bent arm pressed to his chest, and he was paler than the linen on the pallet behind him. And when he saw her in the doorway, he let out a breath he must have been holding since before dawn. Lie. I'm here. Are you? I'm here. He came to her, shuffled, really, and she met him in the middle of the room, and she was so careful with him, with her own bandaged shoulder, that the embrace was awkward and sideways and nothing like a real one. It didn't matter. He pressed his forehead to the top of her head. She pressed her face into the hollow of his good shoulder. Nettle, behind them, was trying very hard not to cry. Oren got you out. Oren got me out. Before sundown. Before sundown. Kyle. He wanted me to take his name. Thorne. Yes. You. I said no. He pulled back. He looked at her. His gray-green eyes, her mother's eyes, were searching her face. Lie. I said no, Kyle. Hessa walked into the hall with 7 others and told him if he collared me before the mountain came, they wouldn't stand with him. She brought me time. Hessa. Her son Yaron died at the river. He closed his eyes. She spoke for you. She spoke against him. But yes, in a way. For me. And the boy with the burn on his wrist, the handler from the pit, he was with her. Cale opened his eyes. Lie. Do you know what you've done? I haven't done anything yet. You have. You stood in that hall and you said no to Vargan Thorne, and you are standing here tonight with 8 people in this valley who were not with you this morning, and the mountain is coming down, and lie. Do you understand? People don't say no to him. They don't. Not in his hall, not in front of his men. You are 19 years old and you walked into this valley yesterday, and you stood in his hall tonight and you said no. I was scared. I know. Kyle, I was so scared. I am. My hands are... Look at my hands. She held them up. They were, now that the hall was behind her, shaking hard. He took them in his good hand. He pressed them to his chest. Lie. You listen to me. You listen to your brother. The mountain is coming down, and I have been in this valley for 2 winters, and I have listened to these people talk, and I know what the mountain means, and it is not good. But whatever walks into this valley tonight, whatever asks you questions on that stone shelf, you listen to me now. You stood up today, in the pit, in the hall. You stood up, Lie. And the people in this valley who matter saw you. She was crying. She had told herself she wasn't going to. She was, though, quietly, without sound, the tears just coming down her face because her brother was holding her hands to his chest and telling her she had stood up, and she could not remember the last time someone had said that to her, and meant it. Lie, Kyle said, and his voice broke. Lie. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. Do you hear me? Kael, I'm proud of you. She bent her forehead to their joined hands. I hear you, she said. I hear you, Kael. I hear you. Outside on the shelf above the valley, a horn went up, long and deep and old, the sound of the mountain houses announcing themselves at the edge of Vargan Thorne's fires. And down on the step of the house with the red door, a boy of maybe 20 with a burn on one wrist walked quietly up and took his stand beside the door, hand on his knife, back to Lyra, and did not turn his head when Nettle whispered his name through the barred window. He had come down from the hall on his own feet. He had not told anyone he was coming, and he was the first of them. The boy's name was Evo, not her father's name exactly, close enough that when Nettle whispered it through the slat and he half turned his head and Lyra heard it, the back of her neck went cold and then warm again. And she did not say anything about it, because there were, she was learning, a lot of Evos in the world, and the world did not owe her a sign. He stood at the door with his back to them for an hour. Lyra did not go back to the pallet. She sat by the fire with her brother's good hand in hers and Nettle's hand on her shoulder, and the three of them listened. The drums had stopped. What had started instead was worse. The sound of many feet, a lot of them, moving along the stone shelf above the valley. Boots on stone. Murmurs, a single bright flash of laughter, quickly cut off. Somewhere a horse blew out its nose. How many? Kael said. I couldn't tell. The torches looked like 60, could be more. 60 men on the shelf. Yes. Nettle made a small sound. Stop it, Kael said without looking at her. Nettle, stop. She doesn't need you making that noise. I'm sorry. Stop. Nettle stopped. Lyra squeezed Kael's hand. She hoped it felt like a thank you. His face didn't change. A knock at the door. 4 knocks. A pause. 2. Evo's head came up. He stepped aside. Nettle slid the bar. Oren was on the step. He looked older than he had an hour ago, and his coat was dusted with fine stone powder from the shelf, and he was holding the unlit pipe in his hand. Miss Vane, it's time. It's time. She stood. Kael tried to stand with her. She pushed him, gently, back onto the pallet. Stay. Lie. Stay, Kael. They've got all of me they're getting tonight. They are not getting you too. He caught her wrist. He looked up into her face. His gray-green eyes were rimmed with red. Come back, he said. I'll try. Come back, Lie. I know. She bent. She kissed his forehead the way their mother used to. She let his hand go before he was ready to let hers go, because if she waited for him to be ready, she was going to sit down on the floor and not get up. She went out the door. Evo fell in on her left. Oren was on her right. Nettle stood in the doorway of the house with the red door and watched them start up the path, and Lyra did not look back because looking back was something she had already done enough of in her life. The slope felt steeper than it had at noon. Oren? Miss Vane? Is Raze here? A pause. No, Miss Vane. Where is he? I do not know. I imagine he is where he said he would be. Which is where? At a pass, Miss Vane, with 2 horses, waiting for me. Yes. He doesn't know what's happened in the hall. No. She swallowed. The taste of the bitter tea was still somewhere in the back of her throat. Oren. Yes. You said the mountain houses, plural. How many are there? 4. The ash house, the stone house, the elk house, the long house. Each holds a different pass and a different valley. They send 3 speakers each. 12 people will ask the questions tonight, Miss Vane. The rest are an escort. 12. Yes. And Vargan. Vargan will be there. With Hessa, I imagine, and the others. And me. And me. And you. And what am I supposed to do? Oren did not answer at first. They climbed 3 more switchbacks. Her shoulder was throbbing under the bandage. Her breath was short. The stone shelf above them was lit now, not just with the hall's lights, but with torches, a whole ring of them held in hands that were not Vargan's men, and the smoke went straight up into the windless air. You are supposed, Oren said, to answer what they ask you. Truthfully, without ornament, without a plea. You are not on trial. You are a question. 12 of them are going to try to answer that question together. You can help them, or you can let them answer it without you. I would suggest the first. You would suggest the first. I would. Because. Because people who answer mountain speakers truthfully tend to live. People who do not answer tend to go up the mountain whether they want to or not. She closed her eyes for a second. Orin. Yes. Will you stand near me? As near as I am allowed. Thank you. Do not thank an old man for doing the last thing he is still able to do, Miss Vane. It embarrasses him. He said it without looking at her. She let it go. The stone shelf above the valley had been transformed. The pit was covered. Someone had dragged a heavy wooden lid across it and laid a thick felt rug on top, so that the place where a bear had backed away from her at dawn was now the quietest space on the shelf. The ring of torches was held by men and women who were not from the valley. They wore undyed wool and dark leather, and they did not speak. They did not even look at her as she came up. They looked at a point about 3 feet in front of her and kept their eyes there. Inside the ring, 12 figures stood in a half circle. They were, she saw, not all men. 4 of them were women. One of the women was small and old and bent, with her hair in a single thick braid as white as bone. One of the men was enormous, bearded, with a face like a weathered cliff. The youngest of them was a woman of maybe 30, with a scar that ran from her temple to the corner of her mouth. They were all in the same undyed wool, the same dark leather, and they all, without exception, wore something around their necks. A strip of hide, each one different. Wolf, elk, bear, stone, it looked like. On the old woman, a thin ring of something gray. The yellow eyes. That was the thing she had not been ready for. Every one of the 12 had yellow eyes. Not all the same shade. The old woman's were almost white. The big bearded man's were nearly brown. The young scarred woman's were a sharp, clean gold. But every pair tracked her in the same way, flicking once, smoothly, to a point just past her left ear, and then back to her face, and the faces did not change. They had all, every one of them, seen the shape. Vargan stood at the edge of the half-circle. He looked, Lyra thought, smaller than he had in his hall. Not diminished, not that, but smaller, the way a man looks smaller when there are a dozen other people in a room who outrank him. Hessa stood 2 paces behind him on the left. 3 of her 7 were scattered through the edge of the ring, not together, on purpose. The boy with the burn on his wrist, Evo, stepped off from Lyra's side at the edge of the shelf and went to stand where Hessa could see him without turning her head. Lyra walked to the center. She stopped where Orin's light touch on her arm told her to stop. She stood. She looked at the 12. The old woman spoke first. Girl. Yes. Your name. Lyra Vane. Your mother's name. Sarah. Sarah of the Hollow Country. Your father's name. She hesitated. Orin had said, truthfully, without ornament. He called himself Evo Vane, the smith of Ash Hollow. But Vargan Thorne told me today that he was something else, before that. The old woman's eyes went flat. It was not anger, it was something older than anger. What else? Vargan called him a bonded. He said, that is what I am. A small stir along the half-circle. The big bearded man did not move. The young scarred woman put her hand very briefly to the strip of hide at her throat. Do you know what that word means, girl? No? Then why did you say it? Because you asked me a truthful answer, and that is the word a truthful man used in my hearing this morning. The old woman looked at her for a long moment. You are hurt? Yes. Show us. Lyra glanced at Orin. He nodded once. She pulled the wool overshirt down off her bandaged shoulder carefully. The bandage was stained through in 3 places. Nettle's handiwork showed around the edges. The old woman stepped forward, closer than Lyra was ready for, and with a hand that was cold and thin and very steady, she pushed the bandage aside and looked at the shape of the paw bruise on the skin below. Then she straightened and she turned to Vargan. Your bear. My bear, speaker. How old? Yearling. How heavy? Perhaps 30 stone. It is on her. It was, speaker. It is not now. No, speaker. Why? Vargan opened his mouth. He closed it. Lyra saw the muscle in his jaw jump. Speaker, I do not know. She stood. The bear backed. You do not know. No, speaker. The old woman turned back to Lyra. She stepped forward again. Lyra held still. The old woman reached up. She was very short, and she laid 3 fingers against Lyra's temple at the streak of white hair, and she closed her eyes. Nothing happened. For a moment, Lyra thought nothing was going to happen. Then the air to the left of her head thickened, very slightly, the way air thickens in the minute before rain starts. And the old woman drew a breath in through her nose, slow and deep, as if she were tasting something. The breath came out as a word. Carl. Lyra did not know the word, but something beside her ear did. The thickening in the air moved. It did not brighten. It did not take a shape she could see, but it moved, the way a sleeping person moves when someone says their name in the next room. The old woman's eyes opened. They were wet. "Oh," she said, just that. "Oh." She took her hand off Lyra's temple. She turned very slowly to the other 11, and she said something in a language Lyra did not understand. It was not long. It was maybe 6 words, but every one of the 11 other speakers reacted. The big bearded man drew himself up a full inch taller. The young scarred woman actually put a hand over her mouth. 2 of the men on the far end of the half-circle turned away from the ring for a second, as if they needed their faces to themselves. "Speaker," Vargan said. "Quiet, Valley Man." "Speaker, You must nothing, Vargan Thorne. Be quiet." He was quiet. The old woman turned back to Lyra. She looked up into her face for a long time. "Girl." "Yes." "Do you know what she is called?" "No." "Her name is Carr. Yours is Lyra. These are 2 names. They are old names. They do not come out of one mouth by accident. The last woman to walk into a valley with the name Carl at her ear was my mother's mother's great-grandmother, and she was born, we count these things carefully, girl, 512 years ago this summer." Lyra could not speak. "The last bonded," the old woman said, "in the world we know of, did not come down into a valley. She went up. She went into the stone house, and she took her place there, and her bloodline thinned, and we believed, all 4 houses of us, that the bonded had ended. We have believed that for 400 years. Quiet. I'm not finished." The old woman's eyes were fierce. "We believed wrong. The bonded did not end. They hid. They went south to the hollow country, where the shifter laws have no teeth, and a man with yellow eyes can be a smith with a wife if he is careful. They married. They kept themselves small. They kept themselves quiet. They buried their gifts. Generation after generation after generation, Lyra Vane, they buried their gifts. And then one generation, the wrong generation, or the right one, depending on how you look at it, a woman gave birth to a daughter, and the thing in the blood did not stay buried, and here you are. My father, your father was a man of great courage. He lived a long life as a quiet man. He paid, in that quietness, a price I suspect he never told you the size of. He died. Of what? The cough. Ah. The old woman nodded. That is what holding it too long does. The cough. We know the cough. Lyra's eyes filled. She did not wipe them. She was not going to wipe them in front of this half-circle. Girl? Yes. You did not ask for this. No. You did not learn it. You did not train for it. It came up out of you yesterday in a pit in front of 30 strangers, and it backed a bear against a wall, and it showed its face to every yellow-eyed person on this shelf. And now you stand here, and you are 19 years old, and you are frightened, and you are hurt. Yes. Good, the old woman said. Good. That you know that. That is the first thing. She turned to Vargan again. Valley Man. Speaker. You meant to take her name tonight. Speaker. Do not lie, Valley Man. I smelled it on you when you came onto the shelf. You meant to put the Thorne name on her before we came up the path. You meant to present her to us as a woman of your house, already kin-claimed, already bound, so that we would be negotiating with you instead of judging her. Vargan's face had gone the color of old paper. Speaker. Did you, Valley Man? Speaker, Did you? Yes, Speaker. And she said what? A long silence. Then Oren stepped forward half a pace. His old hip betrayed him a little. He steadied himself. Speaker. I was there. May I answer? Old man. Speak. She said no, Speaker. She stood in the hall of my lord tonight, and she said no to the name. She said she would not swear an oath before you had spoken. She said she would answer you first and the valley second. The old woman turned slowly and looked at Lyra again. Is the old man telling the truth, girl? Yes. You said no to the Thorne name. I did. Why? Lyra's voice came out steadier than she had expected. Because a man who would collar me before you came up the hill, she said, is a man who would collar me again after you went back up. And I have spent my whole life with collars, Speaker. I am finished with them. Whatever else I am going to be it without someone else's name on my neck. There was a sound then from Hessa. It was not quite a laugh. It was the sound a woman makes when she has just heard exactly the thing she has been waiting a long time to hear someone say. Lyra saw Hessa's hand go up, briefly, to her mouth. The old woman did something Lyra had not expected. She smiled. It was a very small smile. It did not reach her white-yellow eyes. But it was a smile, and the 11 other speakers saw it, and Vargan saw it, and Vargan saw it perhaps most clearly of all, and the color of his face did something else. Girl. Yes. Come closer. Lyra took a step. Closer. She took another. The old woman was close enough now that Lyra could smell her. Wood smoke. Some oily herb she didn't know. The cold, clean smell of someone who slept with open windows. The old woman reached up again, and this time she put her palm flat on the top of Lyra's head, and the palm was warm, and the weight of it was strangely heavy for such a small hand. Listen to me. I'm listening. We are not going to take you up the mountain. The shelf made a small collective sound. One of the men in Vargan's house, Lyra saw it out of the corner of her eye, actually took half a step backward. Hessa's hand went to her throat. We are not going to take you up the mountain, the old woman said again, louder this time, for everyone. We are not going to kill you on the stone. We are not going to hand you to this valley man to collar and use against his enemy. And we are not going to lie to ourselves, any of us, about what you are. She turned her head. She spoke across the shelf. What this girl is, she said, is not ours. Not anymore. She was not made in our mountains. She was made in a smith's house in a hollow village by two parents who loved her and hid her and died before they could tell her why. She is not a thing of the four houses. She is a thing of her own house. And my judgment, not the whole council mine, is that the four houses of the mountain do not have the right tonight to tell her who she belongs to. Speaker, Vargan began. Be quiet, valley man. Speaker, with respect. Quiet. The old woman did not take her hand off Lyra's head. Lyra Vane, do you accept the judgment of the Ash House in this matter? You may refuse it. You are allowed. Nobody here will make you accept any judgment tonight. You stood up in a pit today, and you stood up in a hall tonight. You may stand up one more time. Lyra looked at the old woman, at those white-yellow eyes, at the strip of stone at her throat. What is the judgment? She whispered. That you are not a thing to be kept, the old woman said. That you are not a thing to be used. That you are a woman of your own house, and your house is new, and your house has one member, and she is 19 years old, and she has a bear bruise on her chest, and she just said no to a valley lord in his own hall. And that if the men in this valley, or any mountain, try to tell you who you belong to in the future, they will find themselves answering to the four houses before they find themselves answering to anyone else. Lyra's knees almost went. The old woman's hand was still on her head. It was the only thing holding her up. That is the judgment of the Ash House. The other three speakers may differ. Let them speak. She took her hand off Lyra's head, finally, and stepped back. The big bearded man stepped forward. The stone house, he said, in a voice that sounded like rocks rolling over each other. The stone house agrees with the ash. She is of her own house. Stone stands with her. The young scarred woman stepped forward. The elk house, she said. The elk house agrees. She is of her own house. Elk stands with her. The last of the four speakers, a tall man Lyra had not really looked at, with long hair gone gray at the temples, stepped forward. The longhouse, he said quietly. The longhouse agrees. She is of her own house. Longhouse stands with her. A silence fell on the shelf. It was not a stunned silence. It was a crystallizing silence, the way a cold pool goes still the second before it ices over, and everyone on the shelf, everyone, understood that something had just been decided, and that the deciding had happened very fast and could not be taken back. Then the old woman turned one last time to Vargan Thorne. Valley man. Speaker, you will not put your name on this woman. No, Speaker, you will not raise your hand against her. No, Speaker, you will not send a rider to Oral Duskmere, tonight or any other night, with her location. A small pause. She had not had to name Duskmere. The fact that she did made the muscle in Vargan's jaw jump twice. No, Speaker, you will, if she chooses to stay in your valley. Treat her as an honored guest of the Four Houses. You will, if she chooses to leave your valley, let her leave. You will do these things, Valley Man, because if you do not, the Four Houses will come down into this valley in spring, and they will build a new valley here out of the stones of the old one. Do you understand me? Yes, Speaker? Good. The old woman turned one last time to Lyra. Lyra Vane. Yes. We will speak again. Not tonight. You are hurt, and you are tired, and you have been asked enough questions. Someone from the Ash House will come down into this valley in 3 days. You will speak with her. She will teach you, if you want to learn, how to hold what is in you without it killing you the way it killed your father. I want to learn. Good. The old woman's eyes went for just a second to the space beside Lyra's head. She will want to learn too. Speaker. What, girl? The man in the black cloak. The one who hunts people like my father. The old woman went very still. We know him. He's coming. Here. Yes. What do I do? The old woman's white-yellow eyes held hers. You already know, Lyra Vane. I don't. You do. You stood up in a pit this morning, and you stood up in a hall tonight. There is only one thing left to stand up against. You will know the shape of that standing when he stands in front of you. Speaker, go girl, sleep. The men of the Four Houses will keep watch on your valley tonight. No rider goes out. No rider comes in. Sleep. She turned away. It was not over, of course. Things like this are not over. Lyra understood that, even with the relief sitting in her chest like a stone the wrong way up, even with her knees almost giving under her, even with Oren's hand very lightly at her elbow to keep her upright as the half-circle began to break apart. Vargan did not look at her as he went past. He did not look at anyone. He walked into his own hall without speaking, and the door closed behind him, and Lyra understood that the man inside that hall was, for the first time in his adult life, going to have to sleep tonight with his teeth in someone else's mouth. Hessa came to her on the shelf. She did not hug her. Hessa was not that kind of woman. She stood in front of Lyra, and she looked at her for a long second, and then she took one of Lyra's hands and turned it palm up and pressed her forehead, briefly, against the heel of Lyra's palm. It was a gesture Lyra had never seen. She would learn, later, what it meant. I acknowledge you. I am not your kin, but I am not your enemy, and if you need a hand, mine is near. At the time, standing on the stone shelf with the 4 speakers filing out, and the cold wind cutting through her bandages, she only knew that a woman older than her mother had just pressed her forehead to her hand, and that a boy of maybe 20 with a burn on his wrist was 2 paces behind Hessa, doing the same thing with one knee down. Get up, Evo, Hessa said, not unkindly. She doesn't want that. I do. Then get up. Your knee on the stone is for lords. She's just told the speaker she isn't one. Evo got up. Miss Vane, he said. Just Lyra, please. Lyra, I didn't know what else to do tonight. I stood at your door. I know that wasn't anything. I didn't know what else to do. It was something. It wasn't Evo. It was something. He nodded. He did not trust himself with more words. Hessa put her hand briefly on his shoulder. Come on, boy. We'll take her down. They took her down. Evo on one side, Hessa on the other. Oren a pace behind, slow on his hip, with the unlit pipe still in his hand. Down past the longhouses, where curtains were twitching at windows, and here and there a face was pressed to a crack. And the faces were not all friendly even now, but not one of them was the face of a person who was about to come out of a door, down to the river path, down to the house with the red door. The boy with the scar along his jaw, Tor, was waiting in the path. Evo stopped. His hand went automatically to his knife. Tor had his axe over his shoulder, the long splitting axe, and his handsome face was not smiling this time. He looked, Lyra thought, surprised, afraid. Tor, Hessa said. Warning. I'm not here for trouble. Good. Tor looked at Lyra. He looked at her for a long second, and he had the face of a man who had been told something by other people in the last hour, and had not known what to do with it. Ghost girl. My name, Lyra said, is Lyra. Lyra, he swallowed. This morning, what I said, at the foot of the path. What about it? I was wrong. I was a fool. Say it, boy. I'm sorry. It came out thick. His eyes were wet. He did not look away from her. Tor, Lyra understood, was a man for whom pride was most of what he had, and she was watching him, right now, in the middle of the road, surrender the only currency he knew how to spend. She thought about what she wanted to say. She thought about the old woman's palm on her head. She thought about the way the word ghost had slid off her shoulders when it had been said to her at noon, because she had known already what she was going to do by sundown. You're not forgiven, Tor, she said. His face crumpled a little. But you're not my enemy either. Not tonight. I will see you tomorrow. And if you come to me tomorrow and say something kinder than what you said this morning, I will listen. And if you don't, I will remember. Do you understand? Yes. Say yes, Lyra. Yes, Lyra. Go home, Tor. He went. Hessa watched him go with a small, strange look on her face. Then she looked at Lyra, and she did not quite smile, but something in the set of her mouth softened a full fraction of an inch. Lord's daughter's trick, that. I'm not a lord's daughter. You have never been a lord's daughter in your life, girl, which is why I said trick. Somebody taught you. Nobody taught me. Then you made it up on your own. Good. Keep making things up on your own. Hessa let go of her elbow. Go inside, sleep. If your brother is asleep, do not wake him. Let him find out in the morning. Find out what? That his sister stood in a speaker's half circle and walked off the shelf on her own feet. Kale was not asleep. He was sitting up on the pallet. His good hand was clenched in the wool blanket until the knuckles were white. Nettle was beside him, also upright, and neither of them had been able to speak, apparently, for some time. When Lyra came through the door, Kael's face did a whole series of things. Relief, then disbelief, then something close to fear, because she was walking in on her own feet and whole, and he had clearly spent the last hour preparing himself not to have that. She crossed the room. She knelt in front of him. She looked up into her brother's face. They judged, she said. The 4 houses. They said I'm not theirs to take. They said I'm a woman of my own house. They told Vargan he couldn't have me either. Kael's face crumpled. Lie. They said someone will come from the ash house. In 3 days. To teach me. Lie. Kael. Lie. I'm all right, Kael, I'm all right. Shh. He was crying. Her brother, who had ridden out with the levy at 18 and come back with 3 bolts in him at 20 and had lived 2 winters on a pallet in a stranger's valley, was crying with his forehead pressed to her good shoulder, and she held him, and she let him, and over the top of his head she saw Nettle, brave, silent, scared-eyed Nettle, sitting very still with her hands folded in her lap, crying without a sound. Lyra reached out her other hand. Nettle took it. The 3 of them sat there in the firelight for a long time, not speaking, and outside the door Evo stood his watch, and somewhere in the hills a long, slow horn went up. Not a challenge, not a summons, just the ash house signal that the night had been judged safe. Raze came just before dawn. He came the way he did everything, quietly, without knocking, and by the time Lyra became aware of him, he was already inside, a dark shape against the paler gray of the door, with a dusting of road and hills on his shoulders, and the yellow of his eyes the only bright thing in him. Evo had let him in. She had heard, dimly, a word exchanged. She had been half asleep on a pallet beside her brother's pallet, not under a blanket but on top of one, because she had not had the energy to move properly. She sat up. Raze, don't move. Raze, don't move, Lyra. I only have a minute. He crossed the room. He crouched by her pallet. His face, up close, was tired in a way she had not seen it before. There was a scratch down the side of his jaw, recent, not deep. His hands were cold when he laid them on the blanket beside her. "The pass," he said. "I didn't come." "I know." "I couldn't. Raze, the drums came early, and Vargan tried to take my—" "I know. Oren got word to me an hour ago." He closed his eyes briefly. "He rode a man up the pass to me. I am very, very glad it was him who rode, Lyra, and not you." "Why?" "Because Duskmere is not 3 days off." Her mouth went dry. "He is a day off, maybe half a day. He moved faster than anyone thought. He has been riding, I think, from the moment the sergeant in Carr's Ford came back to him with the news that you were in my hand. He will be at the mouth of the valley by tomorrow night." "Raze, the 4 houses know." They knew before you did, Lyra. That is why the old woman came down. That is why the judgment was what it was. They were never coming down to decide what to do with you. They came down to settle you into their line before the man in the black cloak arrived, so that when he arrives not at a girl, not at my uncle's leverage, but at a woman the 4 houses have declared of her own house. Do you understand what that does to him? No. It puts him on the wrong side of the mountain, Lyra. It puts him facing 4 houses instead of 1 girl. He has spent his whole life hunting girls. He has never in his life faced a house, let alone 4. Raze? Yes. I can't fight him. You do not have to fight him the way he expects to be fought. I don't know what that means. He reached up. He brushed her hair back from her face. His fingers were cold, but his touch was careful, and it was the first time he had touched her, she realized, since he had lifted her off the horse in the clearing 2 days ago. "It means," he said, "that he is coming to collect a thing, and he is going to find a person, and he is going to find that person standing in front of a valley of people who have decided she is one of theirs, not in the way he collects things, but in the way houses stand together. And he is going to have to decide very quickly whether he came here to collect a tool or to fight a war. He came for a tool, Lyra. He does not have the men with him to fight a war. So he will bargain. With me. With you. I don't know how to bargain. Nobody does the first time." She looked at him a long time. "Raze." "Yes." "The 3rd door, the pass. You were really going to take me." "Yes." "You were going to leave your uncle's house." "Yes." "Forever." "Probably." "Why?" He did not answer for a long moment. Then he lifted his hand, carefully, like a man lifting something he might break, and he pressed his palm, briefly, to her cheek. "Because," he said quietly, "you told a sergeant full of king's silver that you did not belong to anyone, Lyra Vane, and I have been looking for a woman who could say that sentence and mean it for a very long time." She did not know what to say to that. She did not say anything. He took his hand back. "Sleep," he said. "What's left of the night. In the morning, we will begin." "Raze." "Yes." "When he comes." "Yes." "When Duskmere comes tomorrow, will you stand with me?" His yellow eyes held hers. "I will stand behind you, Lyra Vane, he said. "That is all I will do. I am not going to stand in front of you. I am not going to stand beside you. You will stand in front of your own house. I will stand behind you, and my uncle will stand behind you, and Hessa will stand behind you, and Oren will stand behind you, and Evo will stand behind you, and the 12 of the 4 houses will stand behind you. And the man in the black cloak will look down the valley at you, and he will see what is actually there for the first time in his life, and he will decide what he decides. But he will not touch you. I promise you that. He will not touch you." "How can you promise me that?" "Because the old woman of the ash house stood with her hand on your head tonight and told 12 witnesses what you are. If he lays a hand on you after that, he is not laying it on you. He is laying it on the mountain, and the mountain is not a thing he survives." He stood, he looked down at her for a long moment. Then he bent. He pressed his lips, very briefly, to the top of her head, the same place the old woman's palm had been, in almost the same pressure. And he straightened, and he went to the door. At the door he paused. "Lyra." "Yes." "The shape beside your head." "Yes." "She is not as still as she was this morning." "I know." She will be awake soon, all the way awake, before he gets here, probably. Do not be afraid of her. I'm not. Good. He opened the door. He closed it behind him. Lyra lay back down on the pallet. Her brother was asleep finally, breathing slow and heavy, one hand still loosely open toward her. Nettle was asleep against the wall, her head tipped at an awkward angle. Outside, the sky had gone the color of a dove's breast, and the ring of torches along the stone shelf above the valley had begun to go out one by one as the day came up. Lyra turned her head on the pillow. "Carol," she said quietly, into the space beside her ear. The air thickened, gently, patiently, in the shape of a listening. "I don't know you yet," Lyra said. "I don't know how to use you. I don't know what my father knew. I don't know what those 12 people know. But I am 19 years old, and I have been the woman nobody chose for long enough. And I am telling you now, tomorrow, when the man in black comes down this valley, I am not going to be chosen by him either. I am going to be the one who chooses. Do you understand me?" The air moved once, a single soft exhalation beside her ear. Yes, not a word. Not exactly. Something under a word. Lyra closed her eyes. For the first time in 19 years, she fell asleep without the coal in her chest, and without the empty face, and without her hand on a knife. She fell asleep in a house that was not hers, in a valley that was not hers, in a bed that was not hers, but, for the first time, in a skin that was. And somewhere, half a day off, a man in a black cloak reined his horse in at the top of a ridge and looked down at a valley he did not yet know had changed, and could not know. Yet, that the girl he had been hunting for a lifetime was no longer a girl he could collect. She was a woman of her own house now, and she was waiting for him.